Hi, Ben.
Hey, how you doing, Barbara?
Good. Want some water? Oh, hello too.
How's it going? Doing well. Hey, was that?
Hello, how's it going?
Oh.
It's an updated FOA. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Hi.
Doing good.
Hi, you have a soda start out of your
Sure.
fridge.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jose.
Oh, no
I got
problem.
my water.
Absolutely.
That's the sun.
I did. Soccer
In
tournament
Phoenix?
outside. Yeah,
Well, that'll do it.
for sure.
Hello, Barbara. Hello. Get myself ready here. Good. I know, we're all just that's hard, and I realized I didn't have to change the parking meters, and I was like, oh, you don't have. Yeah. So I had had to park on Third. I'm running here in my heels.
I used to always park there. And lately it's been full, like city parking lots. Like, you know, that.
At the agenda,
Oh,
Allison and Tom, they're not, they're virtual.
I actually have to run the meeting today, Jose,
Okay.
but I'll be available.
Gotcha. And then we have Allison and Savannah. And they should be, at least hopefully, anybody attendees?
like. we
Andrea,
probably
start, yeah.
Devin's here, and she's the first
Absolutely.
staff
I will,
one. So, alrighty. Welcome, everyone. It's March 15th, 2022, and it's Durango City Council study session. Our theme today is Ensure Effective Infrastructure Network, and I think the mic keeps going on and off. So, future new business and review of agendas. Does anyone have any future new business ideas? Oh, roll call, yeah. Oh, sorry. Can we do a roll call? It's not on the agenda.
Let's do it either way. Counselor Bosman's. Counselor Buell.
Here.
Counselor Youssef.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy.
Present.
And Mayor Baxter.
Present, or close there too. So future new business and review of agendas. Does anyone have any new business ideas or some thoughts on the agendas? I had two agenda items or possible agenda items for the future. There was an email that came out about whether or not some of our ordinances should have expiration dates on them or not, or reevaluation dates. And I don't know if that's something that council needs to discuss, or if, Dirk, if that's something you have some suggestions on or advice about?
Yeah, I think that it's possible to put I don't know that I would recommend an expiration date necessarily for most ordinances, but it certainly could be appropriate to say that this would come back for review at a certain time period. Because again, an expiration would create questions about whether, what impact that would have on the code and some unintended consequences perhaps, but I think it could be a case-by-case review of an individual ordinance, but you certainly could put a 2-year review or 3-year review or whatever on that. I don't know of any entities that do that, but it's certainly something to take a look at.
And so maybe when we have ordinances that one of us think that might be applicable to, we might want to maybe raise that question. The one ordinance that this is referring to was to the e-bikes usage. And since life changes very quickly in the e-bike world, maybe a policy that was reasonable 2 years ago needs to be reviewed, kind of thing. So that was the one that was related to.
Makes sense.
Just a thought. The other one, speaking of e-bikes, when are the recommendations going to come to council for Twin Buttes being available at not just a trial for e-bikes, but being able to have e-bikes used there? Is that something council needs to decide, or is it just a policy change that happens at staff level? How do we do that?
Tom, could you let Turi in? I see him as an attendee. He probably can provide a response to the mayor's question.
The reason why I ask is we have 3 recommendations from 3 different boards to go ahead and open Twin Buttes up on a permanent basis for e-bikes. And so I thought we should make that official.
We do have 3,
Yeah.
Mayor? Okay.
Well, that's the problem, is you actually haven't seen
I
them.
have not seen that.
Exactly. That's-
Okay. I was wondering if I was missing something.
Either way, the Twin Buttes is open to e-bikes under the trial, which was expanded.
It was extended?
Yeah.
Turi, are you available to answer those questions in regards to the recommendations and when it would come to council?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, all 3 boards have made a recommendation to allow e-mountain bikes at Twin Buttes. I know that the Parks and Rec Advisory Board has forwarded on their recommendation to City Council. We are just wrapping up a recommendation letter from Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board and should get that off to you in the next day or 2. And I am not sure if a recommendation has been sent over to City Council from Multimodal, but I do know that they did approve it, that recommendation to be made. So once you all have the recommendation, we are open to setting a time on one of your agendas to, whether it's a study session or a regular meeting, to have a discussion about this, or if you want us to proceed with an ordinance change, we can do that as well.
I think it would be good if we moved on this quickly so that it's very clear to the mountain bike community and the e-bike community that we're pursuing what the boards have suggested we do. It's been a month since the Parks and Rec Board made their recommendation. So I don't know what the best, the most efficient way to do this is. And of course, council has to decide and make that final choice, I believe. Mm-hmm. So
one thing I would caution or just state is that we are having further discussions about Dallow Overend and Horse Gulch. We can make a ordinance change right now for Twin Buttes, but in the event we want to make some additional recommendations for those other 3 areas, we would then need to change the ordinance once again. One suggestion is just to make the Twin Buttes trial period indefinite until we get through the rest of the discussion on the 3 areas. And just do one ordinance change.
Yeah, so I don't know why we couldn't make the an ordinance specifically for Twin Buttes that was more current than the one we have, so that would be available in Twin Buttes. But I think we need to either decide to do this, yes or not. We have a subcommittee that's meeting. It's going to take them months to back to their boards. It's going to be months after that to figure out if we can work with conservation easements in some of those areas. And I think we're muddying the waters. And what we're then saying is that we have 3 boards who've made recommendations to us, and we're not even listening to the recommendation to make a decision one way or the other. So I'm really concerned about that because we've had 3 boards make recommendations and we're not doing anything about it.
I'll just jump in. My own view is that I think we should act now on the information that's certain. And also, if you keep waiting for one ordinance, then is that assuming that it's all or nothing? You know, you have no guarantee that that's how it's going to come out. So why wouldn't we take care of what we know to be the case right now and then let the process that the 3 boards have come up with play out and change that ordinance when it's ready to be changed?
I'm really glad that the mayor has brought this up. I was not aware that 3 boards had supported this, and I agree that we should be acting on it and taking action on it sooner than later, especially when I see those emails going back and forth that we've been receiving as a council that suggests that, this has been an extremely, extremely long process, and I'd rather see us act on it sooner than later. I agree.
Jose, do you have that? So maybe we could even have a discussion and an ordinance at our next meeting so that if the discussion goes well, then the ordinance passes, or it doesn't if it doesn't go well.
Right. Sounds like we have 3, 4, Councilor Bosman 5.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Do we have to have a reading of those?
You would start with a public hearing in the typical fashion.
So April 5th might be the public hearing, and when could we
And
actually?
the first reading.
And a first reading, when could we actually then implement it?
Well, because the meeting tonight, we would have to ask for the hearing on the 5th, actually. So the hearing, because it's not on the agenda for a hearing tonight. So it'll be on the 5th, could be a request for hearing and first reading on whatever the second meeting is in April. That would be
We can't do the first reading on the same city council meeting. We've been doing that previously with.
we could have it at the same night that the hearing, but again, we have to request the hearing in advance. So we don't have it on the agenda.
Right. So on the 5th, we'd have the hearing and the.
No, we have to request.
So we have to
We'd request the
on
hearing.
5th.
And then it would come back on the 17th
Right.
for the first reading. So it could be, and then you have to have it, so is early May is the earliest it could be?
There's
Shortly
no way to
after the
request it. It's too late to request it tonight.
We can't add it to the agenda.
Can't add it to our agenda tonight. Okay.
So we have to, in a public meeting, that's how we have to request a public hearing.
And there are a number of requests for public hearing on the agenda tonight. Yes.
Right.
And do the public hearings always have to be in conjunction with a regular city council meeting, or can you have a special meeting?
You could have a special meeting if you wanted to do that. If the item was important enough to you to do that, sure. You could notice a hearing for a special meeting.
And
So
so
you-
you just walking through that, the advantage would be that if council took action, it could happen a couple weeks sooner. So Dirk, can you confirm with me, you have a request and that's at the first meeting of April, then you have a hearing, that's at the second meeting of April. And then
Hearing and you could do hearing and first reading.
hearing at first reading
Of the ordinance.
on the second meeting in April.
Right.
Okay. And then,
Second
Action.
reading and first meeting in May. And then.
and you have to have 2 hearings,
No, 2 readings.
2 readings.
Uh,
Okay, and then, thank you. And then action would be middle of May at that point?
So the ordinances are effective 10 days after publication. So it's approved at that first meeting in May, then it would be published, which takes about 2 weeks. So it would still be, probably third week of May before that would be effective. But in this case, because we're only impacting Twin Buttes, it would be making those permanent. In other words, there's not, no one's being deprived of their ability to ride there now, but this would be making that action permanent.
Okay.
So you can ride them at Twin Buttes now?
Yes.
And so all we're trying to do for this particular one is show people that we're serious about it. We wanted to make it permanent.
And the 3 boards have recommended that Twin Buttes be permanent.
Totally. Yes. But it's us making it permanent doesn't impact them riding on it at all.
Not on Twin Buttes.
Not on Twin Buttes.
No.
Okay.
Is that correct? Is there anything we need to do for Twin Buttes, Dirk? To
I'm not aware
ensure
of anything, but I'd ask Terry to comment to make sure that that's the case.
The only reason I would want to like rush it or do a special meeting to approve it is if they were like not allowed to and then allowed to. Does that make sense? And so
Yeah, yeah.
otherwise, let's just like, okay,
Let it run.
let it run. We care. We're looking at it. I can't wait to get more feedback from the subcommittee, all those things. But I think.
Turi, is that the case then?
Yes, we've extended the trial period so people can ride their e-bikes right now. And we didn't have any intention of closing that off until we let city council review the ordinance and potentially pass this and make it a permanent thing.
Okay, great.
Great. Okay. So
For bringing that up?
yeah, well, we're, like you said, we've been getting a lot of it lately, and it was just at the Natural Lands Board on last night also. So. Okay. Any other future new business or review of agenda items? Okay, then we'll move on to direction needed items, the budget and strategic plan update.
Mayor and council, we have Devin Schmidt, our budget and strategic planning officer.
Hello, Devin.
Hello, good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Devin Schmidt, Budget and Strategic Plan Officer. I'm gonna just get this pulled up here.
And while she's getting it pulled up, just as a reminder, this isn't a normal budget update where we're going through numbers. What we're doing now is beginning to kind of layer in just some updates on budget, some things that you may see at midyear, some things you may see in the 2023 budget, just trying to get that information out there. So as we go through the process and you see something, it shouldn't be the first time you see it, that we already have an ability to show what we're thinking, and for counselors, if there's any questions, to ask them.
Great. Thank you, Jose. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Hope for this to be somewhat brief, but going to touch on budget and some strategic plan items. And then this gives the ability for council to ask some questions throughout the year. So with that, this is under financial excellence and transparency goal in the strategic plan. And as council is aware, we did have the retreat for the strategic plan middle of April. And so I wanted to take a moment to share with council just a couple of the larger changes that council will see for the April 5th meeting. So on the left there, the document that's in blue, that is the 2022 strategic plan that outlines the short-term and the midterm goals and objectives of council. Also in that document is performance results. So we're showing you ahead of time what the performance results will be in order to accomplish the goals of council. And so just wanted to point that out. And then those performance measures will also be benchmarked against other entities. So we're really trying to show how the goals are being accomplished for council. And so you'll see that on April 5th.
Devin, sorry to interrupt. Can you share your screen? We can't see it on our end.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Thank you. Great. Perfect. Thanks.
Sorry about that. So then the second document picture, this is a change this year, and that's the strategic operating plan. And so the difference here is that this plan is developed by staff based on the goals and objective of council. And so what that's done is it'll give us the ability to show how some of those actions support the strategic plan, and how that document's a little bit more nimble, not changing the overarching goals of the strategic plan. So just wanted to provide that'll be coming April 5th. So you weren't surprised when you saw the two documents there. Another item, as we move and start thinking about 2023 budget, it's hard to believe that that's approaching. But we will be doing the budget development around the strategic plan item. So instead of how we've historically budgeted either at a fund level or at a department level, you'll still see the funding source. It'll still show whether it's an enterprise fund or things of that nature, but it'll be under the strategic plan item. So that way we're able to tie the strategic plan plan and the budget together in a way that's more holistic, and the community and council is able to see, here's how much funding is going towards a particular goal of council.
So that's for each line item on the budget, correct? So for the entire budget, it will be attached to one of those strategic planning initiatives.
Yep. So when we're developing the budget, you'll be able to say, for example, if you wanted to look at ensure effective infrastructure network, you'd be able to go and see what that cost essentially for that particular goal. So that'll be a bit of a change, but we'll still have obviously, yeah.
It's going to be I'm sorry,
No, go
line
ahead.
item by line item in the budget. I mean, it just seems like that's going to be a tremendous amount of work. I'm excited about this change because for us, from a transparency standpoint and visibility standpoint, it's going to be so great. But it just seems like that initial upload for you guys might be tremendous. There's a lot of line items in our budget.
There are, but I think the way it'll be presented, it'll be easy for the public to understand, and it'll also easy for council. It's going to be a bit of a lift for us, but we're excited about it as well, to be able to just really tie these two documents together and the plan together.
Devin, I just would ask you to think about when you're bringing this out, actually, and Tom, for you, a community communication plan, because I'm not certain it'll necessarily be easier for them to read. It may be different, and it's going to take some education. Did I just lose the volume? It's going to take some education there. So I would hope that you budget time and effort on the community communication component.
Yeah, absolutely. That's something as part of this budget process that we're going to work with constituents and put out a lot of public engagement for the budget.
Great.
So A, we can educate, and B, we can get some of those community priorities around what funding items we're doing. So yeah, we're excited.
That's great.
It's really an interesting concept. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So then to Jose's point, we did want to mention a couple potential upcoming projects that council may see either in the mid-year or as part of the 2023 budget process. So the first item we have on there is the pickleball project. And so that would be coming to council for an appropriation when Parks and Rec is ready to do that. The second item is Lake Nighthorse. So there is a need to have a project for improvements at the entrance and to add a decontamination unit so that the flow is a little bit better when you're pulling into that Lake Nighthorse area. So those are two potentials. The other part of Lake Nighthorse, if council recalls, there was a need to do a revenue true up based on the revenues we received from the Bureau of Reclamation. So that'll be coming forward in the way of a revenue reduction in either the mid-year or in the coming months here. And then finally, the last item we have on there is a HVAC unit for the library. This unit was originally put in place it's 14 years old. The library has been spending a lot of money trying to do the repairs and the upgrades to it. I did want to note that there is a potential that we could reach out to the county and see if we can utilize joint sales tax to cover that. But these are three project items that may be forthcoming.
Devin, if I remember Melissa's comment from the county, which was that come up with the budget and stay within the budget, and anything over the budget is up to the city. Is that your understanding, Melissa, when you had a conversation? Because if that's the case, if this wasn't added into the budget with the county, then we may be stuck for all of it.
That is a very, very good point.
And part of my question is, did this just spring up, or should it have been added into the budget as part of that discussion?
This is, I think one of the things on it is this is upcoming. So we're looking at 2023 for this. So it's not in our budget that's not in this budget and be stuck with it. It's as we're looking into the coming year of 2023, this will be something that we will need to address. And I think that's where Devin was saying it'd be a good time to reach out to the county and talk a little bit about joint sales tax funding or their commitment level with this project. But because these are potential projects, some may come in mid-year or some may come in 2023. The library HVAC unit will definitely be a 2023 item.
Perfect. I appreciate that clarification.
And so you're just bringing these up as projects that just highlighting potential projects for 2023.
Or mid-year.
Or mid-year.
We haven't identified where they're at. We're just bringing them and putting them on your radar. So if we do come at mid-year, or if we do come in 2023, it's not the first time you've heard of them.
Okay.
You've had an ability to kind of know that they're coming, so that some of the comments we received at the end of the budget year, or the process last year, it's really weird with this microphone, is that there are some projects on there that councils that we had never seen this before.
Oh,
So this is an ability for us to kind of continuously inform you as the year goes through, so that we try to minimize any type of surprises and kind of bring you along as we're going through the year, and not just bringing it at the time of needing a decision.
That's really great, because these projects sound excellent, and I would love more information on them, but maybe now is not the time. I mean, you're kind of telling us that they're going to come, and we'll probably get more information as the year progresses, I'm guessing.
Yes, you'll definitely, as the year progresses, if we get to a point to where we do need these, we'll come in with more detailed information. But it is a time, if you have any questions, I think like Mayor Pro Tem Noseworthy had, it's definitely a time to ask that question and us to be able to provide some additional input. I think from our standpoint, we wouldn't be able to get into the complete description of it, but just more on the reasoning and thought process, but why it may be a potential project upcoming.
Could I say, oh, sorry.
I was going to then just ask you to follow up a little bit on the pickleball court one. Just a little more info on that, like where, when.
Sure. And I know Terry was on here, and I'm sure he'd be able to articulate that better than I would. Tom, would you be able to bring him in really quick?
We just get so many community members interested in that, so it'd be nice to just have updated info. Generally updated info, I guess.
All right, Terry, you're back.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, so the status of pickleball is we have engaged DHM Consulting, and we have developed some schematic plans. They're further redefining those, and we're planning to go to the pickleball community in the next couple of weeks to a month to verify those schematics. And just to remind you all, this is for pickleball courts up at Fort Lewis College at the Smith Sports Complex in the parking lot. So with the we're starting to develop more detailed construction documents, and as well as some cost estimates. And we hope to be able to get through the design process in the next 2 to 4 months and come to you with a project that maybe we could start as early as later this year.
Wonderful. Do we know how many courts, Terry?
Right now, we're looking at 2 options. We're trying to maximize our parking and keep as much parking as we can. One option has 6 courts and another option has 4 courts. And we're trying to true up the north-south alignment with the pickleball courts as well. That's why we're kind of fiddling with the design, and that's why we want to take it to the pickleball community as well to see what is acceptable to them.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, I've been up at that Smith complex when there's like tournaments for lacrosse and soccer, and that parking is insane. So as much parking as we can save while, of course doing pickle, but because we get yelled at all the time by Fort Lewis people for parking on, everywhere.
I have 2 questions. Oh, sorry.
Just so you know, we have been talking to Fort Lewis about this quite frequently, and are re-upping our lease with them. Part of that lease will allow us to use the Southwest Center for Southwest Studies as an overflow parking lot.
Great
idea.
So going back to the library, I have 2 thoughts on that. With supply chain issues and construction issues, do we need to put in an order or do some preliminary work prior to actually starting in the 2023 budget year? So would you need, to place an order so we know we've got it coming in time? And then my second point is, may I suggest that instead of having parentheses general fund, let's take the more proactive view of for joint sales discussion with the county in parentheses.
Certainly, and I can follow up with Randy and find out exactly. I'm not sure. We're seeing some interesting things with the supply chain right now, so I can follow up and provide those details back to council.
Or so maybe better next year.
You never know. Any other questions on these? Okay.
if I may interrupt just for a second, Thomas asked me to let everyone know that we're experimenting with this, but this study session is live on YouTube at this point.
Oh.
So
Very cool.
there you go.
Excellent. Okay, so then a couple other projects, and these are related to police. And so one of the items that may be forthcoming is an electronic citation device that has translation capabilities. So when Chief was explaining the project, the ticketing service is able to translate in any type of language for the constituent. And then the other item that we have on there is a SWAT van. So we have the range on there from 160 to 260. And I know that Chief had an item that he wanted to share with council related to that. So I can give him a moment.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. So I just want to explain the difference of what this is, what we're looking at, and what it's not. I think it's real important to understand the capabilities of the armored vehicle that we're looking at, just based off the fact of what need is. As we know, law enforcement in our communities, we're not immune to violence. It's happening across the country. There's mass shootings that happen every other week, essentially across this country. We don't have the capabilities in this region of the state to be able to rescue people or to insert our officers safely into these situations if the situation ever arises. And these situations have happened close to home, as we've seen in Boulder recently at the King Soopers and such, and other places throughout the region as well. So if I may, I'd just like to show a couple pictures to council, just again, to show what this is and what it is not, and the different options that we're looking at, since there's a limited source of these type of vehicles that are out there that are manufactured within this country. So this is what it's not. This is a rescue vehicle. That's typically what you see from most law enforcement agencies. It's a Bearcat. It's an up armored, very militaristic looking vehicle. That's not what we're looking at getting. What we're looking at is an up armored SUV or van. And those are the two different versions of it that are out there. That includes the price range that's out there. There are street capabilities that are in this community. And this is just another visual that I want to show. But there's people out there that own weapon systems that fire these types of rounds, which is a 50 caliber. And the black vehicle, the SUV, it has the armored capability to be able to stop this round, which is out there. The white one, the van that looks more like a passport van, has the capabilities of stopping a 308, which is this round here. And these are the different versions of what's out there. And we live in an environment where people elk hunt, and elk hunting rifles are anywhere in between these two rounds here. So it's kind of a mid-range capability that has. Again, there is no vehicle in Southwest region of Colorado that has these capabilities. The closest one is Farmington. It's in another state. And then, or Grand Junction, Mesa County has one of the Bearcats, and Pueblo does. So we're very limited in our capabilities in this part of the state. Again, that's, the importance of the need that we have here for this type of capability to keep our officers safe if this type of situation were ever arise here.
So Chief, this is in our budget for 2023.
Yes, it's at least a 12-month build is what it would be if we ordered today.
This is called the SWAT van.
Up armored vehicle, SUV. There's a bunch of different names. This is just what we use there, just so that council would understand kind of the complexity of what it is. It would be something that our SWAT team and other tactical units would use. And as council knows, we've combined our SWAT team with the county's capabilities. So we're sharing resources with them right now as well. And other agencies from San Juan County up north at Silverton to Archuleta County over to Cortez and Dolores, they don't have tactical teams. We do. And so they rely upon us very heavily to help with their tactical responses as well.
And will this be something that we will be using every day as part of our fleet, or we will have it parked only for certain times?
It'll be parked and it'll be used for training. One, so we know the limitations and capabilities of this vehicle, but also it would only be used during special missions. And we do have those tactical situations where we've got a wanted fugitive or, some other situation in the county where we have to serve warrants or mainly arrest warrants for these type of fugitives that are out there. The most recent one that we had was Elias Buck. He was the inmate that escaped from La Plata County Jail. We searched multiple houses throughout the county in efforts to apprehend him after he was down in Farmington and had shot and wounded one of their officers down there. and has escaped flee.
Will you share this cost with the county?
This one here, we have not talked about that at this point. It'll be, they have a vehicle. This is actually a support of the vehicle that they have. Typically, these type of vehicles work in tandem together. They right now have a military version of this. They have a MRAP, which is a military surplus vehicle. That is a, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but it's a very large, thing that you would see more typically in Afghanistan or Iraq. Surplus programs have allowed the sheriff to procure that for now. It's there, they use that, but the way tactically these vehicles work is they work in conjunction, cover contact type situations where one does one thing, one does another. That vehicle is very up armored, has much greater capability for munitions delivery, for overwatch with snipers and such, to be able to hold a position or to ram through in the case of like the King Supers where they would go. Our vehicle would be in support of that vehicle and it would deliver operators and evacuate people. So ours would be, that's where the share portion of it comes into play in my mind of how we have discussed it moving forward.
And is there no option for the surplus for something less militaristic, but still serviceable?
We've been looking at them. The last thing that we found was a Toyota 4Runner, but that only holds 2 to 3 people. This holds an entire team, so 8 to 10 operators. The vehicle came back from Iraq, I believe it was, and are looking at these vehicles that come back from Iraq and Afghanistan. They're used very heavily over there. Most of them are very dated. They're 15 to 20 years old. Our service department would have to go through that entire vehicle and completely rebuild it because all the rubber, all the motors, everything else is just worn.
And also, is there any opportunity to share this cost with Montezuma or Archuleta County on the assumption that all 3 counties wouldn't need it at the same time? And if it's going to be sitting in storage until that awful day that it is needed, why not have other counties help with the cost?
We can certainly explore that option.
I think it's very good to work close with the county to fill gaps that they wouldn't meet and supplement what we have. I have a question. Why is it SUR fund? Because that would be equipment replacement. Is this not coming from a different fund?
So as council is aware, there is a fund balance within the SUR fund. And so these funds could be utilized for vehicle purchases.
What I understood during one of the earlier meetings, I thought the replacement fund was funded by existing equipment instead of depreciation as a budget, as a financial method. The budgetary method is to supplement this fund with portions of money, and that all these funds have specifically allocated monies back to where they came from, whether it's an enterprise fund or so. Can you explain a little bit how that would work?
That is correct, Councilor Bosmans, you are correct, but remember the SUR fund actually still has a fund balance that was in there. So we have set it up to be an equipment replacement fund, which it is, but there also is a fund balance in that fund that could be used to purchase other vehicles. And once that vehicle is purchased, then PD would then have to put in the annual replacement fee for however many years this lifespan of the vehicle is going. We just happen to be in a unique situation with the SUR fund that in the past it created a fund balance and we need to find ways to use it. We've used some of it for an IT replacement fund. This would be another opportunity that we could use to fund this, but it is a replacement fund. It just had already been, it had been funded a little bit more than it needed to be in the past years.
Be not financially more appropriate to refund some of the excess amounts that individual funds have contributed to the SUR fund, and then have this van financed through whatever the appropriate fund is, whether it's the general fund or the police department fund, or maybe there's outside funding available?
I would say that either way is an option. I don't think there's one that's more financially responsible. They're both uses that you can use, so it really is just a philosophy.
Well, the reason I bring it up is if the SUR fund is overfunded, let's say by the water fund or the trash and recycling, then we're using an enterprise fund to spend money on a van for a different department, and that's maybe not the way those funds were set up.
I think that's also making an assumption that the fund balance is just from the utility fund, and you're discounting the possibility that PD may have actually overpaid paying into the SERV fund as well. So while the statement in whole could be accurate, but it just makes assumptions based on that one fund has already overfunded, and that may not be the case.
Would it be possible to clarify how much, in this case, the police department has allocated to the SERV fund, and see if that is adequate to finance the SWAT van, and make sure that all the funds have their own portion that they allocated in the SERV fund available for use within that?
That's something that we can consider as we go through. Remember, this is just telling about a potential project. I'm not sure we need to figure out exactly how it's supposed to be funded at this point.
So what I was going to suggest was possibly when we get to the budget aspect of this, where it comes up in conversation, that we do know the balance that's in the SERV fund, which departments have paid how much of that into it, so that we can either allocate it back to them or we can do this type of thing with it. I think that is the correct way to look at it, because it isn't a lump sum. It is by department. But I think it's a good conversation for budget.
Right, the detail when we get in there.
Yep.
Thank you for clarifying, and thank you for the presentation.
Okay. But these are a few examples. We're just like it is good to be aware of this ahead of time. I really appreciate it, because these are the type of things that, in a budget process would take a lot longer if we hadn't been exposed. Like, wait, what, when, what, really? So I think it's a really good idea.
Appreciate the
that you're
feedback.
doing
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you. So this one on this slide, you'll see that these are listed as upcoming airport projects. So these are actually going to be in the more near term. I think council is aware, historically prior to 2021, there was an ability to transfer between projects and those funding. Since that is at a council level, we wanted to bring forward a couple airport projects. So the first one is the runway bid for the large project that's supposed to occur in September and pause airport traffic. So that came in 7% over budget, and that's really due to high asphalt costs right now. And so for that to be have a little bit of construction contingency, that would increase by approximately $890,000. That project is 91.88% FAA funded. So there is that opportunity and that partnership there as well. The other part is the Taxiway A reconstruction project, and those came in 4% under budget, but the plan there is to save that for any level of contingency with the cost that we're seeing. And then finally, it's the South General Aviation. That came in 4% over budget. And so in order to be able to have some contingency and have construction administration, the request that'll come forward for that is $25,000. And just to re-clarify, these are projects that are going to be in the very near future that will come with an appropriation for council.
Devin, did the taxiway reconstruction project not have a contingency amount included in it originally?
I believe it did, but with the amount of the asphalt cost, it wasn't enough to cover that. But I can get the full clarification.
Taxiway A, the second one, came in under budget, but you're maintaining the budget as a contingency. Was there not already a contingency included in the budget?
I can get clarification on that one from Tony.
Yeah, because it could, if that's the case, it could very well be that just gets to go down to the South General Aviation taxi lanes and covers that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And that is historically how projects would have been handled. But in order to bring them back to council and have the intent still be there and where we're at today, that's the intent, to bring it back to have that 25,000
I absolutely would
cover
say
it.
we would have to reappropriate it, but it then wouldn't be an increase if the other one already still has a contingency in it.
Correct. It should end up being a net effect for those two projects.
Okay.
Any other questions on the airport projects? Okay. Just a couple other items that we're watching just based on what we're seeing. So the fuel prices could result in a request for an increase in the mid-year budget. So there is some potential there. And then material costs because of what we're seeing with the asphalt, and then as well as some facility material costs. There could be some increases that affect the bid proposals across the CIP, but we'll keep council informed on those items as well. Just wanted to bring that up and keep it kind of in the forefront for council. And then finally, I've already talked about this, but on April 5th, we'll bring back the strategic plan for council to review any of the changes at the study session. Staff will incorporate those changes, and then we'll bring that back April 19th for consideration. So that's all I have, unless there's any other questions.
Excellent. This is great. As Councilor Youssef said, I really appreciate this heads up and that thought process. All righty then. So now we're on to capital improvement plan division implementation.
Yes, Mayor and Council, we have Allison Baker with our Public Works Department to give an overview of the capital improvement plan division that we've established, kind of where they are today, and some of the upcoming projects that are being worked on currently.
Hello, Allison.
All right, I'm hiding behind the screen again. I will, once I find my. Good afternoon, councilors and mayor. Allison Baker, Public Works Director. So, oh gosh, yeah, thank you. Are you sharing for me? Yeah. I appreciate it. Want to just give you a brief update, sort of an intro here. When I started last June, was direction from Jose, city manager, that one of the scopes of work of the new Public Works department would be putting together a CIP division. So we immediately started getting together all the people who were working on projects. We brought the folks from utilities and engineering who were reporting to me, got them together, started bringing in multimodal, streets, and Parks and Rec as well. So they've been meeting consistently with tremendous support. I have to give a lot of credit to utilities for leading the way on this. And from June through December, really starting some communication and coordination of the project so we weren't stepping back and forth on each other's toes, and getting projects organized so that they followed a nice linear path. So that's been a great process. We worked with finance for putting together a 2022 budget for CIP, which you then approved. And in January, went ahead and hired Jennifer Holland from Utilities. She's been project manager there for 4 years. So she's got that familiarity with our utilities projects, and she also brings another 30 or so years of construction background to the position. So we're lucky to have her, and she's been real busy January, February, and a little bit of March putting together a process. I think everybody looked at the project list. It's extensive that we've got for 2022, and she's working through a lot of the details with project managers and working on hiring. She has put together a presentation that she'd like to share that gives you a little bit of update what's going on, and then you can ask specific questions about the projects or anything that would be useful. I would mention our one little complicated situation with our CIP division is that we are using two current engineering positions, one of which is filled, the utilities position. Matt Matt Holden will be splitting his time 50-50 between utilities division, doing design and development kind of work. He's a professional engineer. And the other 50% of the time doing CIP, project management. Well, as part of the 2022 budget, you approved a new engineering position for a civil engineer / CIP engineer. So this is somebody that Keith Dougherty is currently working on hiring somebody for. And he'll also be split in that 50-50 sort of manner between the two. Other than that, I look forward to bringing a lot of details back about Public Works in general come June. I figure we will have had our first year, so I think we'll be due for an update then. But right now, let Jennifer go ahead and show you what she's been doing.
Hello, Jennifer, welcome.
Hello, thank you. I have long titles. Let's try it over. There we go. Should be it. And I just have this as a PDF here, so we should be able to just kind of scroll through it.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so,
Sorry, I'm
yes.
sharing. Okay. Very good. And good afternoon, councilors and mayor. As Allison has indicated, I assumed the CIP division manager position in January, and I'm here to share with you today the progress made thus far in implementing this new division. First, I'd like to start by acknowledging that CIP stands for slightly different things in different contexts. My understanding is that Capital Improvement Program is the division within Public Works. Capital Improvement Plan is a group of projects and their timing. And a capital improvement project is an individual project to upgrade or replace existing infrastructure and facilities. The main reason for this clarification is I would like for us to agree on how I and other CIP personnel present the name of our department or our division as we go forward. And here's what I have heard are the primary driving goals and dividing lines for how CIP is expected to operate. We are to professionally and consistently manage CIP construction projects and coordinate with stakeholders. Individual departments and divisions, such as engineering, multimodal, parks and rec, streets, and utilities, oversee their own needs assessment and designs, and then CIP does the constructability and estimate reviews. Their projects are handed off to CIP at design completion. CIP then works with purchasing for bidding and procurement. And we also oversee the construction and preserve the project information for future use by individual departments and divisions, as well as the city as a whole. And the rest of my presentation is intended to show you how CIP intends to achieve these points.
Jennifer, could I ask a question about this one?
Yes.
If you go back to the previous, I wasn't quite clear. I'm hoping that what this is telling us is that the CIP group will be involved at some level in the designs because of advising on constructability and cost estimates?
That is correct.
Great.
And I do have some more detail on that as I show you how we're going to implement this. But I
Perfect.
definitely do have some more details for you there.
Perfect. Great. Thank you.
And just one more point. I'm not certain I heard it correctly. When you talked about the individual project, did you reference that as improvements on existing projects, or could it also include new project?
It could include new. Typically, it is existing. We normally accept developments into the city that have the streets, have the water lines involved, and then we have to maintain them, replace them when needed, that sort of thing. Certainly can include new, but predominantly
So
replacement.
pickleball courts, something new, might fall within the CIP.
It is slated for CIP. Parks and Rec in particular has more of the new stuff that they bring in. Some of that comes in through development as well, but for water and for streets, it's really typically
Understood.
replacement.
Thank you for that clarification.
Here's a brief overview of our current staffing. As Allison said, I have about 30 years of construction management experience in roads, utilities, general building, and I started my career working in clean rooms. I have 4 years with the city, and I was the utilities project manager prior to CIP being established in January. We have Matt Holden, who is a project manager / utilities engineer. He has 19 years with the city as a civil engineer. He's with the city and he's with utilities and has been doing design and construction management prior to this new split of responsibilities. So much of his time will still be doing engineering for the utilities department. And when he's working on project management to implement some of these projects, he'll be charging to CIP. And we have, just as of Monday, we have confirmed that Owen Talmadge is transferring April 4th from an engineering tech position, and he was an inspector prior to that. He has 7 years with the city, and he has considerable previous construction experience on top of that. We also have open positions that I'm actively trying to fill as quickly as possible. Our project manager for transportation projects, we are interviewing 2 candidates this week. The project manager utilities position, we've been contracting for some of the immediate needs, and I'll be posting that position very shortly. We have the split position with engineering, the project manager civil engineer that Allison referenced, that Keith is advertising for. That one is also posted. We're also looking for inspectors, both senior and more entry-level inspectors, and those positions are also posted. So as I noted, Owen is a transfer from engineering, and he was an inspector at one time, which brings up there's engineering inspectors, there's CIP inspectors. What's the difference? Engineering inspectors oversee private and developer construction for compliance with city-approved project documents, city codes, specifications, and standards. The CIP inspectors oversee our own internal improvements, our city-funded projects for compliance with the contract documents, which include approved plans, specs, codes, all of that, but also the contract and pay items. So there is a slight difference there. An engineering inspector goes out and says, you need more silt fence, and then they walk away. A CIP inspector says, you need more silt fence, and yes, we will pay you for that. The 3-legged stool is a common model used in many industries to highlight the 3 most critical aspects required for success. If any one of the legs is lacking, the stool falls over. In the case of construction management, the 3 critical aspects are cost, schedule, and quality. But of course, multiple things are required, must be done to shore up the legs for project success. To support successful cost management, during the design phase, CIP will conduct constructability reviews to ensure a well-defined scope and assignment responsibilities. We will review the engineer's estimate and ensure appropriate quantities and unit of measure breakdown for cost control. And depending on the timing, we may either be initiating or revising, if necessary, the construction budget. It's also important that we look to identify and address potential cost impacts, whether those be utility conflicts, rock, soft spot, tailings, or possibly cost savings and value engineering opportunities. And then we build a plan to cover these items or to address these items into the bid documents. During the construction phase, first thing is, did the bids come in within budget? Once we have that under control, it's all about change order management. Big part of this is making sure that the contract is clear and that the contractor understands any work done outside of the contract agreement without prior CIP division approval is at the contractor's risk, which means that they may be required to remove that work at their own cost. So either we approve it or it's not authorized and we may not pay for it. The other piece of change order management is managing owner requested changes. We'll work with the individual departments and divisions to get the bid documents to reflect what they want out of the project, because you get your best, most competitive pricing at bid time. For an example of how we need to make sure that pricing breakdown is appropriate at bid time, say we have a project that shows 2,000 feet of pipe that are going to be replaced. And if we get one lump sum price for that, and then we later need to add 5 feet, we'll likely have to pay a premium on that 5 feet. The contractor will say, oh, I had to buy a 20-foot stick of pipe and pay for shipping. But if we get a dollars per lineal foot price, a unit price, with an estimated quantity of 2,000 lineal feet, and then we add 5 feet, we get that added 5 feet at the same competitive bid pricing. So we'll be looking at that from design on through to see that we can get good pricing, but also for change management.
May I ask a question before you?
Certainly.
And it's on a human scale, which I appreciate the technical linear feet and everything. I'm just curious which department, when trees are going to have to be removed for a project, and that might come up in design phase, where does the responsibility for communicating that with the public lie?
Where
would that be? The CIP department? Would that be Parks and Rec, multimodal? Who would actually, if trees are going to be removed, be sharing that information in advance with the public?
Where are these trees?
It could be on a path that the Parks and Rec has put a project into the CIP, and it's going to require 2 trees to be taken down, possibly. I'm just making this up, right?
Right.
I'm just wanting clarification of who's going to make certain they're communicating that with the public.
That would be Parks and Rec, because the project belongs to Parks and Rec until it's ready for bid time. We're working with them to make sure that it's structured to get them what they want, but they're the ones that have the vision for what they're after, that will conduct the public process as required to make sure that the public is in. Our next leg is quality management, and for quality control and quality assurance during the design scope, we want to make sure that we have a clear scope of contractor QC, and city QA testing is needed. The frequency, the types of testing, all in the bid documents, to include the city specifications and specific department and division requirements for materials and workmanship. We're working with engineering to update the city specifications to make it easier for us to get projects out to bid, as well as easier for contractors to know what to expect. So that if you're working on a parks project and it involves water line relocation, that's the same spec, the same requirements as if relocating that water line were out of utilities. Our specs are a bit dated, and so sometimes we don't have that consistency right now. So we're working with engineering on that. And those updated specs will also have those units of measure, the way that we're paying for those individual items to make it more consistent and easier for contractors as well. During the construction phase, daily inspections are key, the documentation of that, and plus collection of material certificates and test reports per project requirements, as well as the timely removal and replacement of any unacceptable materials or installations. Schedule management. This would be the one that I hear the most about. I have schedule management actually broken into 2 parts, for individual projects and for CIP as a whole. For the projects, we need to make sure that we have a well-defined scope and assignment of responsibilities, that we identify and address potential schedule impacts like long lead items. And during the construction phase, we need to make sure that each project has an individual project or schedule done by the contractor prior to construction starting and updated monthly. It will be tied to their pay applications. So we cannot approve a pay application unless they also give us that updated schedule. We also need to make sure we have regular project and stakeholder communications about any open issues or unforeseen conditions. You may have noticed that scope, having a plan to address foreseeable impacts, and communication are underlined and have shown up repeatedly in our discussion of cost management, quality management, and schedule management, because they are critical to the legs they serve for the success of a project. And for the overall CIP schedule, we have a schedule with all the current city CIP projects in it, and I'd like to give you an overview of how it's structured. And then we can talk more details at the end, of course. For each project, we have the project number and the name, the division or department served, the project manager, and budget information, in addition to the typical length of construction, start and finish dates. The red text indicates procurement items that involve purchasing so that they can kind of key in on those items and see where they're needed. And the yellow highlighting is for information that we're still fleshing out, some things that aren't completely set in stone yet. Well, schedules are never completely set in stone, but some of the things that we don't really have solid information on. The one that's on this screen is the Columbine Landscaping, where Parks and Rec is still working on how they're funding that and getting an associated project number. Together, this information provides a dashboard view of the CIP work, procurement activities, and it works also for balancing the staff workload and consultant needs. I can look at subsets of this information by filtering by the division served and or the project manager to see where we're overloaded. Like one person has way too many projects and one person has 2. Well, we can look at that pretty easily and then rebalance the workload or bring in an outside consultant where needed, which is particularly helpful while we're still staffing up. This is a working document. I update it at least monthly. I've been doing it roughly every other week at this point, just because we're still getting a lot of these details nailed down. And I've provided you a separate document for readability in that study session folder, so that, because I understand, I don't really expect you to be able to read this. I'm just kind of giving you an overview how it's structured. But I thought we could use that other document to discuss any particular projects in more detail at the end of this presentation, if you're interested. Currently, I only have the 2022 construction projects scheduled with future projects listed farther down as placeholders. These 2 sections under these gray headings down here, lower on the screen, are just placeholders. There's no real schedule information associated with them. And at the very bottom, we have these funded CIP projects that don't really fit in the CIP division definition, and they're not being managed by CIP. Either they're less than $50,000, or they don't have a 3-year or longer depreciable asset. Therefore, the airport, which has specialized operations and requirements. The library projects are also here, at least until the library district decision is made. The ones that don't fit the $50,000 and depreciable asset requirements, such as design studies, they will not be proposed as CIPs going forward because they do not fit the city definition of a CIP. They'll be more within the department or division or strategic operating goal that we have set for them. But for now, at least I did want to still have them in here. And part of that was I imported every project we have into this schedule, every CIP project. And then the ones that don't fit, I made sure to talk with those people and make sure they understand that CIP is not doing this one, or yes, CIP is doing this one. As Allison mentioned, we've been doing weekly meetings with CIP personnel, which would be me and half of Matt so far, purchasing and the individual departments and divisions to discuss project status and any concerns from initial planning through design, bidding, and construction. The goal is coordinating between projects for traffic, like along 32nd Street and the County Road 250, 251 project. We don't want to two-block people. And then also for the longevity and protection of assets and investments, like we want to replace a water line before we invest in the street surface. Also been pushing on how to provide better information for council and the public at large. Been working with Devon Budget and Strategic Plan Office for consolidated financial and progress reporting for both council and the public through OpenGov. It has a project reporting map with pinpoint locations and the project names with budget amounts and cost to date, so you can see where we're spending money throughout the city. Also looking at an Esri product. Esri does the GIS system that we have. It's a project reporting map also. On that one, we can do a project boundary, the outline, so that people can see, is this really on my block? The project name, an overview of the scope, schedule, and contact information. Oh, that is on my block. I need to know more. They know who to call. Working with media and community engagement to establish a website for CIP with mission and key functions information, and then links to both of these sites so that they can access information on all of the projects. Also looking into combining this information and reporting with census data and into one convenient package. that'll assist with the DEI reporting with the census information in it, and that's much more of a Devon push, but we're supporting that as best we can, and so you can see where our CIP dollars are being spent. But this effort is going to take some programming, and so we can't do it yet, but we're going to go ahead and do what we can now. For the consistency of documentation and processes, I am developing a CIP daily inspection report form. I'm working with engineering as they have some forms looking at that as a base, but some of the things that we look at are a bit different. Been gathering sample historical documents and highlighting the areas that have to change for each project, kind of building a reference library for the incoming people. Invitation for bid, request for proposal, the project special provisions, that's what fills the gap between our outdated specs and what we expect now are the project special provisions. And we develop them for each project. Pre-bid and pre-construction meeting agendas, as well as standardizing our closeout procedures and forms. We've established the common location for project files. As-built and material submittals and other helpful project documents will also be in Lucity, which is our work order system that the maintenance crews can access. So when they have a problem on a water line, they can go to that water line in the map and click on it and get the project information right there. Record drawings go to OnBase and also to GIS, but it has to be in a standardized format in order to upload and update not only the map, but also the condition assessment information that we have for utilities in particular. And this is something that we have to build into the design engineer scope. Typically what we get from contractors is, here's the plans, and then they take a red pen to it. We can't upload that into GIS. So we need the engineers on board to get it into a format that can be uploaded. Otherwise, we have people going out and getting the GIS location for this valve, for this valve, for that valve. This will be a much more standardized process. It'll be much more streamlined, and we just have to build it into the design going forward, which is part of why I'm very excited that CIP is involved, at least on some level, in the design. And looking ahead, we are gathering the updated, latest and greatest 5-year plans from individual departments and divisions. And mid-year, we're going to start looking at designs for larger 2023 construction projects so we can bid them at the beginning of the year and utilize the full construction season. For larger and more complex projects, it simply isn't reasonable to expect that design and construction will happen in the same year. So we need to work with the individual departments and divisions to plan ahead and get these designs started earlier so that we can actually get out to bid over the winter months and be ready to hit the ground running when we have beautiful weather like this. And that is my overview of CIP division implementation to date. Do you guys have any questions or want to hit on any particular projects or schedule concerns?
Shall I start?
Yeah, I'm curious, just point of process clarification. So are we here until 4 o'clock today on this item?
Yes.
I'm just curious. Okay.
No, we're here till 4:20.
No, 4 on this item though.
Oh,
yeah,
24:40. Yeah, 4:05 actually. No, 4. Yeah, 4.
And then one more question, and then I'm sorry.
Sorry, I usually write them down. So
it was just because I just want to clarify like how. I have quite a few questions, and so I'm not sure, like, do we want to,
why don't we do our,
handle this?
why don't we do our typical system, 3 questions each?
Is that what we do? Okay.
Yeah, and then 3 questions each, and then 3 questions each.
Okay.
Until we get them all done. And if you don't have 3 questions the second time.
That's fine, right. And then do we want to get into real detail here? I mean, this is just an overview. This is a, we don't want to get into our real budget work here. So I guess I just want to specify that.
So, I mean, I think the intent for this was to inform the council of everything that was going on with the CIP division. It was definitely a major investment by the council. My recommendation to really get a hold of our construction projects and be able to have a daily oversight and supervisory of these projects to help us with cost and being delivered on time. So with that going through, we thought it was important that we would report back to the council to let them know, here's how the CIP program division looks like. Here's what they've been working on. Here are a lot of the things that are going on behind the scenes that most people don't really see from an outside perspective. I do believe Jennifer for you placed in some projects that she may be able to discuss. But this is also going to be a partnership, I think, also with department heads. She'll be more on the construction side, but if it goes into when is this project being considered or questions like that, that would be more apt for the department than it would really be for the CIP division. Not saying that that's what you're going to ask, but trying to put some boundaries or parameters on like a question that may not be able to be answered here.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So which one of you wants to?
Oh, go, please.
Oh, please,
No,
I'll follow you.
No, you go first.
Okay, we'll start. It's either first line in the alphabet or last in the alphabet. So which way, last or
Go,
first?
Councilor Bosman, I interrupted you. I just wanted to clarify process.
No, I think that's also a very good aspect of meetings, running meetings. So, thank you so much for the presentation. I really appreciate that. I'll stick to 3 questions, but it'll be a little explanation I give. I hope the schedule you will share periodically, the capital list, the capital project list, managing change orders that you mentioned. I think is very good. Is what I'm used to with unit rates particularly. So you have that covered. Maybe not so easy for unforeseen items if you hit something or something doesn't go as planned or surprises. On the quality and inspections, I just want to make a comment finishing with a question. I hope we can make sure to work very constructively with builders and developers versus policing in a more negative way. And on that inspection part, how are you looking at or how are you dealing with responsibility for quality of work? Once you do the inspection and approve it, you assume the liability responsibility for whatever it is. And where do you draw the line? Sometimes the external engineer or designer, material supplier, or the contractor needs to be held responsible for what they have done. And if we as a city, or you as not you personally, but as an inspector signs off on it, we assume that liability. Is that something that is, maybe your thought on that?
As far as the first comment about the cooperative aspect, it kind of falls naturally with CIP because we are the client. And if we are requiring anything above and beyond what's in the contract, then it's, yes, we will pay for that because there's no choice. But if it's within the contract, then they just need to fix it and we pay them. It's an ongoing business relationship, and it does tend to stay much less adversarial than a developer who sees the city inspectors perhaps as somebody that's keeping them from making their money. We are how they are making their money. So that helps a lot with that right there. Once we inspect something, there are some inspections that have to be done before the water line can be tied into our active system. However, if that water line leaks before the 1-year warranty is up, not just from the inspection date, but from project completion, then the contractor is still required to come in and fix that. Yes, there are some items that require, I was, for the water dock, I was there to inspect, yes, it is installed. It is not leaking. Good. Then we had to bring in the suppliers' representatives, their engineers, to fine tune the system. And so the system was not fully accepted by the city until that point. Does that kind of address?
Yeah, I think with my comments, you will get the gist. There's a fine line between taking over responsibility and inspecting.
Yes.
And still having them responsible for the design, which if it's an external company, you would not have done. So yeah, no, I appreciate it. And I think it's more a comment to keep in mind. The other point I wanted to make is that design phases, which is obviously not part of this, but it often takes very long. And maybe you have any thoughts on how to improve that. One of the things, and also on your list, I think it would be very interesting to see moving forward, or to a certain degree going back, when projects initially started, the initial design, and then when it gets handed over to your division, and then your time frame when it's completed, we'll obviously see. Because I think there might be areas for improvement in deadlines, for example, on certain studies. If they take too long, we can start over again.
Right.
And I'm not sure to what degree you could help with that, or your feedback is,
Well, since the division was founded on January 1st, my schedule starts on January 1st and nothing really goes back beyond that. I wasn't trying to recreate the history, but going forward, yes, when we start a project, I would like to, once a project is approved and we start a design on it, I would like to capture that information. And I'm hoping I'll be able to do that through our weekly coordination meetings. I'm taking furious notes all over these schedules in every meeting, which is why I'm updating them pretty much every 2 weeks, because I have no more room to write after 2 weeks. Some divisions do need more assistance in getting projects through design. And, you know, they have full-time jobs running their division work. We haven't gotten into the details of that much yet. I would like to look for ways to assist with that, but for now, getting CIP running on the construction side of things and getting people hired has been more than full-time, especially since I'm still pushing some of my projects. So I haven't spent a lot of time on that, but I do intend to see where we can assist the other divisions and departments with the design process where needed.
Thank you. I think we'll move on to Melissa then, and then we'll come around.
Yeah, okay.
Am I next?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So 3 questions. So I just generally, I have a question with this process and with this spreadsheet. Will this be tied, this CIP budgeting be also tied to the strategic plan, like our budget will? Just generally?
Yes, it will be. It will depend on different parts of where the project is. If it's a parks project, it might be a different
Right.
goal than a transportation, but yes, it would definitely.
So we'll be able to see that.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, like what areas we're spending our CIP in. That's great. Okay. So that was a quick one. These projects that have been identified here, just verifying quickly, they've all been approved by the boards, correct? Like the Parks and Rec projects, for example,
Recommended by,
recommended by the boards?
not approved.
I will throw a caveat in there. Lake Nine Horse is still on here, which has not been budgeted yet.
Okay.
There's several.
generally?
in here. Yeah, most of these are funded, so I certainly hope they have been approved by
That's
their
okay.
boards, but
I'm seeing a few new ones. Okay. Okay.
I would also imagine though that there could be times when there are projects that you're anticipating to bring forward and you need to get them on a schedule so they don't get,
Right.
but they wouldn't actually take place until they were approved or
Or
funded
recommended.
or whatever.
Yeah.
By us.
Yeah, because like some of like the Parks and Rec, they have the strategic plan, 5-year strategic. So I'm assuming you're pulling those probably from there, in all departments, I'm guessing.
the department's design process, especially to date on these projects, is not something I've been very involved with because I just got involved a lot more on January 1st.
Right.
I do know, I've heard Devin King talking about taking projects for public process and the board involvement. I've heard, this is going on, but it's not something that I would be tracking.
Okay. And I have one more very general question before I get into specifics, and then I'll pass it to somebody else before I get into specific project questions. And it's a higher level budget thing. When I was going through this and I was flipping through it and looking at it, I found it very interesting, and it's really nice to see it all in one location, first of all. But also, I was wondering in some cases, like what budget it was coming from. And I didn't know if you may want to extend the spreadsheet to include that. Like,
it's not a spreadsheet. It's a different piece of software. It's called Project. It's a scheduling software.
Right. Okay. Because it has okay.
Which one do you use?
Project.
Because I was just curious. I don't know if there's ways to add that, but in my mind, it was curious or to link it in some way, high level.
I think one of the challenges that we're having here is that this is really an internal use document.
Right.
And it's not really our document, right? So I can see some challenges with that. I wonder if maybe one of the ways to deal with that, though, is all projects that are water projects are the titles in blue. The ones that are sewer projects are in brown or something.
We do have the division served is one of the columns.
There we go.
And when I go into the weekly meetings, because this is a 5-page document and it's ordered by project number, And you get different people from different divisions talking about their projects, and it's not even in order of project number. So I was flipping all back and forth the first couple times. I print it out. I sort it by each division, and then I print it out. And I could certainly make that view available to you guys. And one of your other comments was about having this schedule updated on a regular basis. I update it very regularly. You guys let us know how often you want to see that, and we can certainly work with that. And going forward, I can certainly have you the all projects version, which this is, as well as I have utilities and sustainability on one together, because we are working with sustainability on several solar projects. And they don't have many other projects, otherwise, it'd be a very short schedule. So I put them with us. Parks and Rec has their own. And then I have another one that is engineering, streets, and multimodal, because their projects are all very linked as well. So I have those three different views. I could certainly present those to you as well. And there is a column for division served, and it says if it's P&R, streets, all very abbreviated because there's so many columns already. But that information is in there, and I could make it a little easier for you to see.
Thank you so much.
I wonder too, when Devin does her strategic plan and budget updates quarterly, that she usually has she usually has the projects in there that either, which will, because I doubt we'll see this all the time.
True.
And so I think that will tie for us probably. Yeah, Devin's saying yes.
Right. This is a supplementary document. It's certainly not meant to replace any of that other financial reporting.
Thank you so much. Very interesting.
Jessica or Barbara, did you have?
Yeah, I can just do a couple. First of all, obviously, we love and supported the idea of a CIP division, and you're starting off strong, Jennifer, so thank you. Since January 1st, this is a lot of work. I was in construction and used, these scheduling softwares, and getting all this information in there and all the dates and stuff is a big task all on its own. So congratulations. I think that the cost accountability, QA/QC, scheduling successes in the end will show. How does your role change, like your contractor relationship between a design bid build contractor and like a CM at risk contractor? Is there a difference? Does one work better with a CIP department? I just know the city typically does design bid build. They've had a couple CMGC projects, but not very many.
Correct. I'm not against design build at all. There are times, there's one of the projects that we're looking at as design build right now, and it is one that we're doing with CDOT and multimodal. And it's 256, the ADA improvements, the 3 or 4 transit stops. That one is a design build project, so we're certainly not opposed to that. I do think that if you're looking to really fast track something, you can do design build, and then your contractor's on board with you, working with you as you are doing the design, giving you estimates, trying to dial that in, but you do pay a premium for that contractor's time. You also kind of guarantee them a certain level of income before you really know exactly what your project looks like. So there's definitely pluses and minuses to it. The design, some projects are designed in-house. Parks and Rec does some of that. Utilities does some of that. Some projects are relatively small to design, and so they can be done fairly quickly. There's just so much variability in our CIP projects that I would be hesitant to say we should do them all this way or we should do them all that way. But we are looking at some different methods for procurement, certainly. There's times when we want to pre-qualify a contractor. Normally, we just get our qualification requirements in and go with low bid, but sometimes it's more sensitive and we need to pre-qualify a contractor. So we are open to other procurement methods.
So you have 5 open positions right now. Have you had much interest, and can you be successful if you don't fill those positions right away, or?
Well, so far it's been me and half of Matt, which I mentioned before, and keeps me awake at night sometimes, certainly. Having Owen committed for the Parks and Rec position helps a lot because they have a lot of projects. Having good interest for the transportation project manager. We have two good candidates that we're going to be interviewing later this week. And if we pick one, I'm hoping I can convince the other one to work as senior CIP inspector, because I have not had any qualified applicants for the inspector positions. And that does concern me.
I think my biggest concern is, when Allison brought our CIP plan to us, we want to meet our strategic plan goals and we want to support Allison and say like, yes, let's do it all. Let's, anything you want, we want to assist you with, but I just get nervous. If you don't have the staffing, can we do these projects or is there a different route we have to go, I guess?
For some of the utilities, some of the big push utilities projects early on where we're looking at contracting the assistance for contract management, even Goff Engineering is having a hard time finding an inspector. So yeah, it is concerning. So I'm upping my my advertising game, keeping positions open. Gonna hit PCC and San Juan College information and see what we can come up with for some inspectors, some people interested in inspecting. Also, we put out what we wanted in the job descriptions, and we may need to be a little more flexible and plan on training people more.
Well, I like the drive and flexibility, creativity.
Yeah.
Great work. That was my 3.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I'm assuming this is a promotion for you, yes?
Yes, it is.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
On that. And I think it's great that you're promoting from within as well. So that's not a question though.
Oh,
so
that doesn't count. Okay.
My 3 are, first of all, I wholly see the value of an integrated effort of this and possible reduction in duplication. I'm curious, and you may not have it all thought out now because you've had to do so many other issues, but how do you plan to measure the efficiencies of this department in the sense of increased number of projects completed or reduction in costs throughout the other divisions? I'm just wondering eventually, not right now, how you can see looking at the outcomes of the CIP division other than, we've gone from 5 projects of 25 million to 15 projects of, 75 million. I'm curious of how you're going to measure your efficiency.
Well, we're certainly going to be measuring how many of our projects we complete in the timeframe that from when they were given to us. Obviously, I cannot control the design process. So that's part of why I'm really wanting to get the departments looking at doing their design earlier, starting mid-year, not planning on doing it all in 1 year, because there's a lot of the projects that we're not going to be able to complete in 1 year. That's just the nature of it. So I'll be looking to measure what we are completing. And of course, we will have the budgetary numbers to see how much it costs us. As far as comparing to prior, I'm not sure I have the information to compare to what's been done in the past. I can probably access it. It is not something I've thought extensively about yet. That's certainly, I am trying to set things up so that we can clearly measure what we're doing going forward so that I don't have to try and recreate that. But comparing it to historical is something that's going to take a little more digging and might take a little more time to get to where I can dig.
Understood. On the issue of the 5-year plan, first of all, to the Councilor Youssef's point, I'm actually not certain we actually can add those items in because each council has to approve the budget. But it does beg, for me, the question of asset management, and I may sound like a broken record, but how do you, Julie, right? Jennifer, excuse me. Jennifer, how do you or Allison plan to add in asset management responsibilities and upcoming issues into your CIP schedule? Recognizing that those are things that absolutely have to take place, whether it's an HVAC at the library or this or that.
I can speak a little bit to the utilities piece of that because I worked on the utilities condition assessment, which is our risk management. It is our program, and we're still working with GIS to get it rolled out so that we can use it. But that was part of when I said we have to build into the design where the engineer takes the red lines back into something that we can easily upload into GIS. At that point, then GIS would export a table of all those assets. We would have to update the information, and then that table would get uploaded back in so that we have the constant update of information on the utilities condition assessment, which is in place.
Okay.
So just to share a little more information, Lucity is basically, we call it an asset management system, but it's really not focused on the ongoing cost to maintain and replace and those items. But we've got several directors working together to look at an asset management program. It will definitely incorporate the inventory management that we're doing of all the pipes, all the pieces of each of our plants, all the pieces of park equipment, ultimately, hopefully, facilities and fleet. I think that's a little bit farther down. We're more focused on the infrastructure portions. Currently, Streets has a lot of information in Lucity. They do a profilograph every 3 years, and that information gives us a block by block condition assessment of sidewalks, which is a little shaky. We're working on that, but very good information on the pavement condition. So we are working toward that. I don't think we're quite there, and it will inform a lot of our CIP 5-year planning that'll ultimately end in Jennifer's hands.
That's great to hear. And my final question may be more for either the city attorney or the city manager. And you talked about working with purchasing. And I know, Dirk, I think you're working to revise our purchasing policy, and I'm wondering how that will impact the CIP divisions. Getting that policy revamped, revised will impact the CIP plan for implementation.
We're working on it. We haven't actually started making the revisions to the plan yet, but I was planning to get together with finance to do that. But the procurement really is about bidding at the point when the project is designed, and so procurement gets involved at that point at the end to take it out to bid. So those processes will be reviewed for efficiencies and so forth. So it certainly will impact, but my understanding is the CIP will be involved in helping develop the documents for the bidding, but the bidding will actually be handled still by procurement.
So then for the city manager, with all of this increased productivity and output in terms of CIPs, can we expect that you're probably going to come and say we need more on the purchasing side to help with that?
More with the purchasing side.
Procurement of the different contractors?
We'll see. I think it's just kind of a process. I don't want to make a commitment yet as we go through and find out how we move through. But if there is a need for additional support, I'll definitely bring that to the council.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd be really interested. I love what you're doing, by the way. It speaks to the geek in my mind, if you will. So it's wonderful. Thank you. And I'm love listening to you talk. You speak very well, and you're getting your point across, and I have confidence in what you're saying. So I love it. So speaking of KPIs, like how to measure what you're doing, I'm wondering if there are things like on time and on budget, which the city in the past has had some real problems with, and whether or not the initial build meets and suits the needs. I'm thinking of the soccer fields up at Fort Lewis College that had to be redone because they weren't particularly spec'd well in the first place, given the conditions up there. So I'm wondering if those aren't some of the kind of things that you might want to look at as to how well you're doing. I think that would be it would be really good for us to be able to say the 5 largest projects we've done since 2022 have all been on time, on budget, or under budget. And oh, by the way, we don't have to go back and rebuild them. So if you could come up with some really good, clear KPIs that are good about being able to communicate with the public too, would be awesome. Because I think doing 10 projects a year doesn't mean anything. In the sense it does to you for volume and how well you schedule it and everything, but that's just a number. It doesn't imply or infer quality or efficient use and operations. Yeah, so that would be the one thing that I would, when you're starting to talk about KPIs, like how does that work?
We're certainly tracking the information so that we will be able to develop the best measuring best ways of measuring it. We are definitely looking to measure how many of our projects are completed on time. We're definitely going to be measuring how many of our projects are completed on budget. And I sure hope that I can come back and say that our top 5 ones were all on time and on budget.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Bosman's, any more questions?
No, I appreciate what you presented and going, and I think I look forward to the next steps and seeing how it develops over time.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to get into detail of the program specific questions on my list. So I'm going to stop with my questions right there too. And thank you again for all of your effort. Welcome.
Thank you all.
Any other questions, councilors?
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, I'm just curious. Do you see potential for, or maybe not see potential? Do you have possibilities of involvement with other municipalities who are doing something similarly and learning from their efforts, or also advising other municipalities on the creation of something like this?
Have not considered that, but I will note it.
I'm just always thinking about professional development opportunity to learn from others or to share with others.
Thank you, and noted.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Jennifer. Appreciate it. All right, then on we go to community-wide survey, and that would be Tom, I believe. And I think he's virtual.
Let me change and wave to everybody. Yeah, I am virtual today, and let me get things set up for you. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing a spreadsheet in front of you, and then I'll start.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so good afternoon, councilors. Tom Sluice, Director of Media and Community Engagement for the city. What I have for you today is a draft of the Community Satisfaction Survey that's been part of our strategic plan. And what I'm going to seek is basically just some feedback on the plan and some direction on which way to go. What I have also for you is I have Andrea Fox, who is in the, sorry, I need to stop sharing and bring her in real quick. And Andrea is a representative of Zen City if we have any detailed questions that I cannot answer. So what I'm showing right now is the draft of the survey itself. And we have essentially, I think, 4 or 5 main sections that we're going to be presenting to people. And what I've done in the notes column on the section T is I've gone through and looked at the previous survey in 2020 just to kind of compare and contrast how it aligns with the current survey. So what I'll do is just go through the survey, go through the notes I have, and then open it up for any questions. So,
Tom,
yeah.
could you magnify that for us and maybe stay within the section or something, because we can't read them at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's really bad.
Shoot.
Yeah, it's in from his email to us. It's where it lived.
Is that any better?
Yeah, yes, significantly.
Okay. Let me try and shrink it down here. Okay, so the first question is, do you live or work within the city limits of Durango? And this is actually a refinement from our survey back in 2020, which is, I think, is going to help us, I think, get a better accuracy within the survey, as opposed to just opening up potentially to people who don't live within the city. And the next section is about the quality of life in Durango. So all of these questions are prefaced with how satisfied are you with, and then it gets into the actual question. So the first one is, how is the overall quality of life in Durango? And I think this really consolidates the 2020 survey questions, which had 3 areas that were separately seeking a response, which were the overall quality of life in Durango, the livability of Durango, and the ability to retain quality of life and community character. And you're going to see this trend throughout this survey, which is, I think last time we did this, we had 30 to 40 questions. I think it's been narrowed down to about 19. And Andrea will be able to explain the methodology about that. But you're going to see these questions consolidating some of the areas from 2020. So for example, how likely are you to recommend Durango as a place to live? That matches 2020. We have a couple of new ones. How likely are you to be living in Durango 5 years from now? And what is your favorite thing about living in Durango? It's an open-ended area for people to share in their own words what they like about the city. The next question matches the 2020 survey question. What's the thing you would most want to change about life in Durango? In 2020, it was phrased as the 3 most important issues you believe Durango will face within the next 5 years. And so that's the general section on the quality of life in Durango. So the next section is about the different parts of life within the city. Overall quality of services provided by Durango, that matches 2020, which was framed as the current level of city services provided. Availability of affordable housing, that actually consolidates 2 questions from 2020. They were specifically asking how satisfied are you with housing options, as well as how satisfied are you with the housing prices. The next 3 questions all match the 2020 survey question that we posed to the public. The first one was about the availability of jobs and paying a living wage. That was just phrased generically as how satisfied are you with employment options. Access to quality healthcare services, that was again a match with 2020, and that was phrased as a how satisfied are you with healthcare options. Education, same thing, matches 2020. Public transportation, this really is a consolidation of 2 separate questions from 2020, where we were asking people the cost of transportation and access to jobs in the context of how satisfied are you, as well as how satisfied are you with public transit service in general. Overall safety is almost a 1-for-1 match with 2020. And let me back up one quick second here, because within each of these questions that we are asking people to respond to, they're going to have a 1 to 5 scale of rating how they feel about this particular topic on a 1 to 5 scale from poor to excellent. And I just wanted to point out that, as we're going through it, it's not going to be a, do you like it or not? It's going to take some thought and some deliberation from the participants to scale these on a 1 to 5. So getting back, we do have some new questions this year. I think our DEI question in particular, we didn't have this last time, which was how accepting residents are of people from all backgrounds. We have a new one on the ability of residents to give input to the government. And we have just an overall cleanliness and maintenance question for people, just to give their kind of gut check on how clean the city is, essentially. We do have a specific question for Parks and Rec. That really matches 2020, where we asked how satisfied are you with the availability of parks and recreation opportunities. Same with waste and recycling, which was in 2020 posed as how satisfied are you with the value received from public services, such as water, sewer, well, transit's in there too, but water, sewer, trash, recycling, it's kind of a combination. It's not a perfect match, close. And then finally, the availability of a variety of arts and cultural events that really consolidates some 2020 survey questions, which were asking about the satisfaction levels with the availability of special event opportunities and the satisfaction with arts and culture opportunities. So that's really the kind of the meat of the question, the survey, I should say. I did make a section here to put the 2020 questions that were not included. And I listed them all here. A lot of them seem to be economic related in terms of, one was how satisfied were you in 2020 with the availability of shopping or the cost of household expenses. I think there was a general, how satisfied are you with economic opportunities? But there was a very specific question from 2020 that was not included regarding how satisfied are you with sidewalk and ADA curb ramp conditions, street conditions. A more generic, how satisfied are you with the availability of retail goods and services, library services, general community design and aesthetics, enhancement of community standards. Not sure what that was going for last time, but it was a general, I think, open-ended question, along with future of jobs opportunities, the rate at which city is growing, and the direction in which the city is headed, the ability to respond or change or unforeseen events. Again, I think Andrea would probably be in a best position to kind of explain maybe why these very open-ended general questions weren't too heavily weighted. in the survey, but I will not speak for her on that. And then finally, in the demographics, we just had a generic demographics question of, I think it was, do you own a house in the city last year in 2020? And this year, we're trying to get more information about the year that you were born. How do you identify? And that was also a DEI question. People could say female, male, or self-describe. Current employment status is new. Specific question on if you're a Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, or Spanish origin, your race. Owning your home was a match of the 2020 question. And then we do have some additional 6-7 questions about income levels and marital status, et cetera. And I think those questions are just going to help us further refine, who's actually providing the feedback to the city through this survey. And that is really it. So again, we had about 30 to 40 questions this time, or last year, 2020, sorry. And this year, I think if you break them down, you're probably getting down to, I would say, 6. There's 20 already, and then plus the final question. So we may have cut the total questions by about half in terms of the methodology this year. So with that in mind, I was basically just wanting to get some feedback from council on your level of satisfaction with the survey at this point, and then hopefully get some direction on the path forward at this point.
Okay, councilors, any questions or comments you'd like to make or talk to Tom about, or Andrea?
I'll make a general comment real quick. I like that it's shorter than the 2021. I think that a lot of people, if it gets into like a really long survey, end up not doing, I do with that anyways. Like I'll start something and then if it's taking too long, I'm like, forget it, I'm not going to do it. And I like stop. And so I think to get some of this information, it's better for more people than we got in 2020. I think it's better. And so I do like that. I'm not going to say that the questions that we're omitting, we don't want to know about, if that makes sense. But I think it's like what our goals are and trying to focus in on that. And so as a general, just kind of starting point, I want to say I appreciated that.
Yeah, I have a question, Tom. And this is not my area of expertise. So, but I'm trying to provide feedback as someone who would just be taking this survey. It's not clear to me on the add-on questions, the various ones that you asked. It's not really clear to me on each question why that information is necessary or helpful. For example, what does being married or unmarried or whatever, how does that help you inform your thinking? And that's just one example. So my whole take on that whole section was I wasn't clear on how it was going to help the city.
Sure, Andrea, you can jump in anytime, but in general, I think we were just looking to help get some a better idea of just where we're getting this information from and from what particular demographic. I think it's helpful, obviously, to know who's actually taking the survey. I think the main priority for us as a staff was really to make sure that we're getting an adequate representation from city residents as a whole. Will this data be potentially used to further dig in? I don't know. I think really if we have a contentious issue potentially that is noted by participants, we could potentially look at it to get some additional information to see like, well, who is raising the biggest question about, for example, transportation issues? I'm just making something up, and maybe that's people who are currently unemployed, which I think would kind of make sense. But if we have that data, that would help clarify that. Andrea, I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
Yep, and thanks for allowing me to be here today. I think that's exactly right. One of the examples that I had thought of similarly was there may be people in a certain age range that maybe have a certain opinion about parks versus a different age range, right? So it just helps you to understand, the demographics of the folks that are responding to the different questions to allow you to be more responsive if needed or as needed.
Would you mind stopping sharing your screen so that we're more person to person here? Great. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think it might be helpful when you prepare that survey to possibly provide a little more information to the people that would be filling it out so they have a sense of how it's going to be useful to you.
Okay. Can I ask a question? Are there any areas, I think specifically in this one box that we're not, are there any areas that we didn't cover that you would like to see that are high value to make it more beneficial for you?
Are you speaking to Barbara?
Anyone, all counselors.
Why don't we let the general comments first go, and then we'll go back to more specifics, or maybe you could incorporate them into your comments.
Yeah, I think I only saw this survey now, yeah, so I really haven't had time to look into the questions too much.
Well, Tom emailed it to us last week.
Oh, okay. Must have skipped.
There was a
skipped
lot of
this.
email add-ons for the agenda, so it's hard to track it.
Yeah,
I've been pulling them all up myself.
Yeah, I download the agenda an extra time on the day of the meeting to see if there's any changes, and every time there's changes, so I have to go back through the whole thing. But this survey was not in it. Tom, and maybe you explained this when I was out of the room. I just went for a bathroom break. My questions are: what is exactly the intent of this survey? Since the questions are so high level, that's one. Then, what have you done, or what has been done with the prior survey? What are the consequences? Did we use it in any shape or form? And then on representativeness of the survey, who receives this survey? I think those are the questions that I have, because if we want to have some proper feedback to make improvements, I have a feeling that the questions should be more specific. If we want to get a general feel on how our community feels on communication, then you're probably going to get a very good response, because as soon as you respond to an email, you check the box that you responded. But maybe the content of responses, or yeah, I guess how high level to detailed, and what do you do with the survey in the past year and moving forward? What is the intention?
Sure, I can definitely answer the first two. I mean, the intent is just first and foremost to meet the goals that we set out within the strategic plan, and specifically under engaged and collaborative governance, we're tasked with the community survey to find the quality of communication with residents, metrics as needs improvements, good or very good. Just to state, the obvious, which it's part of the strategic plan, which is why we're doing this. In terms of what happened with the prior survey, I honestly don't know if that information, I'm sure since it was completed in February of 2020, that it was, guessing it must have been presented to counselors at that time to get some feedback. I think we had 82 respondents when I checked the feedback on that. Now, how council may or may not have incorporated that feedback into any sort of policy discussions, I'm not sure. As far as the representation goes, I think Andrea would be in the best position to answer that. And specifically, you're looking for how we are seeking different types of representation, Councillor Bosman?
To me, you mentioned, I just heard 82 respondents on the 2020 survey. Yeah. So to me, I find it very hard to tell anybody that we're spending time and money on surveys if we get 82 responses. So that is, to me, a concern.
Sure. I think the recent surveys done by community development in the 300 to 400 range would be great. I know we have had virtual city hall results in the 800 to 900 range also. I think a lot of it depends on the topic. It's really kind of a crapshoot depending on, what the topic is that's going to dictate how many responses you get. One thing we did take note of, though, within my department was, I think, the level of satisfaction by council and by community development on using SurveyMonkey was definitely noted. Virtual City Hall has a very dedicated group of individuals within Durango, which I think deserve credibility, but it can be a clunky system to use. I'm sure you all saw the email from one resident who couldn't even get through because of an email address glitch, which I think was really relegated to just using her cell phone. But again, what the survey was used for, I'm not sure.
Maybe as a finishing comment, I'm almost thinking that as a council, we should consider reassessing on how we deal with surveys and what the benefit is of doing surveys. And if we do a survey, to make sure it reaches a target or either a larger group or answers questions that we're looking to get answered.
And I can jump in a little bit there that we recruit a sample of respondents that's representative based on the city's census demographics. And our target would be, much higher than 82. And we distribute the survey online. So we know that 93% of adults are connected online through, your cell phones, your tablets, other devices. So trying to lower that barrier to get folks to participate. And that's how we get more folks to participate in the survey, trying to meet them where they are.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think Councilor Brosman brings up a really good idea. And one of the things that, I'm looking at our downtown visiting plan, and we've had over 1,000 responses on that. And Tom, you getting that article out in the paper was very helpful. I do think that this information is really good information to have. I have a couple questions because I am by no means an expert on surveys as well. But I'm wondering, on some of them, they're very, very general. And I'm wondering about getting, do you ever consider getting a little bit more specific? Like, for example, overall cleanliness and maintenance of Durango streets and I don't know, or do you ever think about getting a little bit more specific for this, or are you generally keeping it so high level intentionally? That's my first question.
Sure. We're trying to find that balance between keeping the participants engaged. And in order to do that, you got to, not get bogged down with too many questions. And it's definitely a balancing act. I mean, I don't know if there's an absolute right or wrong in this. But if there are specific areas, that we could include, I'm sure we'd be happy to incorporate them. But I'm sure Andrea could speak to that too, which is it's always that balance of, and I think Zen City has done some research that says, the participation levels, I think, drop off fairly quick, the additional questions that you add to these surveys.
That's right. So we work with our survey research team on these questions. And in addition, one of the advantages of having similar questions is that it allows you to benchmark against yourself over time. So having questions that you're going to be comfortable with for a while, and also allowing you to in time in the future benchmark against other communities as well. And I can, if we have time or if there's any desire, I can share my screen at some point and show you a sample of what the dashboard will look like when the community survey results start coming in, so that you can kind of picture how this will be a useful tool.
Well, that might be interesting because my next comment, and to see that dashboard, because my next comment was going to be, I've been on council, and honestly, unfortunately, we have done very little with these surveys and with the results that we get from these surveys. And I actually think that if we do it right, and if we work hard enough as council representatives, as staff, through our boards and commissions, and through our various local organizations to help us get this survey out, and for people to really understand the importance of us getting this feedback so that we can then use it to help set our, with our strategic planning initiatives when we get together as a council and staff, and through policy setting. I think it would be really helpful information, but I've yet to see us use it to the depth and to the benefit that we should, that I'd like to be able to, because if we really had a good feel and we really felt it was representative of a community's gauge of overall safety in the city of Durango, and it was a representative answer of our community, that would be really good for all of us to know. We would, it would be very helpful, and it could help us when we're going through this. So I'd love to see us focus on this a little bit more. Your questions were really good, Councilor Brosman, and that's exactly, I think, there's a lot of local organizations that I think also could help us get this out. Our boards of commissioners, residents, hopefully they're all taking it, our members, but also, Dado, Alliance, BID, the chamber, they could be helping us push this out through their sites and Local First. I would just love to see a much higher response rate, much higher, so that we could consider it representative. Just my thoughts.
Are those your questions?
Yeah, thoughts and questions, because I do think it's helpful. I mean, I think it'd be great information if it was representative. At 82, it's not.
So I had a couple of questions too, and they mirrors what some other counselors have said. And I think the biggest question we have to ask ourselves is, what's the purpose of this survey? So what are we going to use it for? What kind of insightful information are we going to gain that's going to be used to inform our good decision making? Because if we're not actually gaining anything from it, then I'm not certain why we're doing it. And so the idea of being able to compare it with the previous survey, we actually, unless essentially we're doing exactly the same survey, it is not directly comparable longitudinally, because when you're going through a survey, if it changes every time you take it, it does impact your responses to it. So we have to understand that longitudinally, it may not be all that helpful compared to the previous summary and survey. And we have to look, when we look forward in time, we have to be careful that we can add questions, absolutely, but we need to be really careful, I think, about how we do that. And I'm wondering if what we're really not trying to do is evaluate how well we're doing relative to our strategic plan. For example, should the city be doing more or less in some areas? That's, are we meeting the standards? Is there something that we're lacking in? Are we doing better than expected? So that we actually know where we are in people's mind, not just they're feeling that they have a pothole in their alley, so they're upset. But overall, are we doing enough or are we not doing enough? And one of the things that I found really interesting, and actually there's two areas for this, is we passed a tax in 2019 for streets and alleys and ADA and sidewalks and other such sort of things. There aren't any questions on this survey about how have we done with that. So in 2019, we started doing that. It's 2022 now. It's been 3 years since the tax was passed. Are the residents good with the work we've done? Will we be able to use this survey to know whether or not we can re-up a tax, this particular tax in this case, so that when it sunsets 10 years from now, we know with fair confidence that 8 or 9 years into it, we can go back and continue it? If we don't start now with those kind of questions, we won't know how we're being perceived in the work that we're being done. And we could also apply that to housing. So your question of how do you feel, is there affordable housing? Well, no, there isn't. And we all know that's the answer. So the question really is, should the city be more involved in helping create housing? In what ways should we be doing that? These are things that are going to influence our policies and help us make good policies for our future. So I think the survey, I think it's great about, how do you feel about, well, actually, some of the questions are good, they're fine. But asking about education isn't anything the city can do anything about. We're not the educators. Asking about healthcare isn't anything that the city can do anything about. We're not the care providers. We're not the insurance people. So asking those questions isn't really going to help us with our policy decisions. Do we feel safe? Well, we have two different divisions that create our safety, police and fire. Which one do they feel safe with? Both of them? Neither of them? Half of one? What are we really trying to measure here? And I absolutely agree with your comment, Melissa, and with yours too. We don't want it to be 100 pages long or anything like that. But we also need to be really clear about why we're doing this and what benefit and what information are we getting from it? So, that we could also be asking questions like, if the community had to choose between the city incentivizing housing for the next 10 years or funding the 2005 post for the next 10 years, which choice would they want to make? Do they feel that housing is so tough right now that for the next 10 years, let's do housing and then we'll go back to Parks and Rec? You know, because we've been doing Parks and Rec for 30 years. These are the kind of things I want to have help inform me with my decision-making. And I don't know how the rest of council feels about it, but if we don't really have a use for this, and Tom, I've heard you say a couple times in this conversation, I don't know what we're going to do with it, or I don't know what we've done with the last one. I'm not certain we should be bothering our constituents, our residents, using our time, your time, if we don't have a purpose. So I'm done. That's my soapbox.
May I add something as well? I just made a few notes as well prior as we were going around. And I do appreciate the effort to keep it manageable. And again, to what everyone else said as to what purpose, but I also would ask, you know, things like tourism is a huge part of our, so-called a huge part of our economy. And the question, now that we're investing significantly more, what is the community as a baseline? What do they feel about the tourism right now that's happening? How does it impact their lives? Transportation is another issue. And to the mayor's point, you know, do we need to be putting, you know, are we putting sufficient funds into public transportation and tying that to housing? And then the question of the amenities, you know, she raised the question, streets, you know, and open space. And again, for me, that would be very helpful. That do we need to look at a different balance or of how funding is allocated? So for me, I see this as a baseline going forward. And I also want to recognize that something is being done right, because we are getting many more people to respond to surveys than in previous years. So I want to recognize whatever the outreach is, we're seeing change. So I do see potential for many more people to respond if we have a clear intended purpose for this information.
I'm sorry, if I just made just a couple points on it. The February 2020 survey was before I think a lot of us were even here. So from my vantage point of that survey, I don't know how it was constructed. Findings were never presented to me. There were never any policy decisions to it. So I just want to put that out there for those that are listening and kind of wondering, yeah, well, if you didn't work in 2020, why are you doing it here? I want to put that perspective of it, of most of us weren't here from a staff perspective of in 2020 in virtual City Hall, and not understanding where their intent was going with those questions and what was going through there. Part of coming to it with a community survey and, you know, kind of coming to a study session before we send it out is to receive some of this feedback. You know, are there areas that maybe we need to focus on with some questions that are a little more pointed? And I think we've been able to get some of that. Where do we go with this? Is this absolutely gets used for us? And, you know, as we look at doing our strategic plan, you know, finding a hot spot that might happen when you look at some of those areas that might come up where maybe we ranked lower than we thought, and then being able to then say, okay, maybe we need to dig deeper into that because it's something that we didn't anticipate and we need to get more information on. So surveys are really good. A good way of measuring or of doing a feedback. Is it the only way? No. Is it the one that you want to continuously just always rely on? I think you want to do a good shot of relying on it, specifically if you get to a statistically valid one. And that's kind of the part about with this option. But it definitely is going to be utilized. I can't really speak to why the 2020 didn't get utilized, but only 82. I would make it a little bit tough to base decisions based on that. But this would definitely be something we look at and taking this data and utilizing and taking the input from here. And then maybe we come back to a different study session with it. After hearing the input, here are some of the other areas we may want to take a look at with some questions.
You bring up a really good point, just very quickly. Sorry, Jessica. Also, but you know, in 2020, we weren't doing a strategic plan either. And we weren't gathering for strategic plan retreats. And so, you know, we were just kind of I almost felt like we were in reactive mode at that point. And so we're in a different situation where we're looking proactively. Some of these questions could help us get there.
And if I also, Melissa, you just made me think of something. In 2019, when Melissa opened as mayor, you know, she talked about restoring a trust in government. I may not get the exact quote, but that real sense of making certain that people feel that they can trust the actions. And for me, that would also be useful as a baseline. What's that level of belief in the institution of city management, and how do we improve upon that? Not that I think it's, not that I think it's low. My sense is it's gone up significantly, but I'd like to be able to continue measuring that.
And I would just to add to that, I would say that one of the questions I had here about the tax for the streets was, would they continue it because they trust us to use it wisely? Because we've shown that and that we can't, right? Yeah.
Couple things really quick. I want to note, like, I think that there's a balance of like these general questions and like the ease of getting around by public transportation. If most of the respondents come back and say no, then we know we need to look deeper into that and like maybe do a poll at the transit center and maybe do, like, I feel like I'm struggling with like getting so many questions that people don't answer and then getting good information so we can maybe focus our strategic plan around it. And then also, like, to the mayor's point, I think it's really important, especially with the tax coming up the soonest, to get like citizens' ideas and thoughts as to what we should do. Should we do more parks and rec facilities? Do they want, money to go to trails and parks and rec still? Like, is that super important to all of our residents, or is housing, or is more money to streets because we don't see enough being done with the money whatever it is? I think it's important that we get some of that feedback out, and we can't constantly inundate people with surveys. And then I also had a thought. I think it'd be really interesting. I know there was a big spike in the people that returned the downtown survey. Mm-hmm. And I would like to hear, like, was there something that happened? Was it the Herald article? Was it, I know Melissa and I both posted it on our social media pages in one day, like within 24 hours of each other. I know it was like, is there something that is more helpful and that we should do as a city to get those respondents so we don't get 83 again?
It's all of the above. And if you don't mind, just to follow up, all of these surveys are just a part of the whole. And you're right, we have a lot of surveys on a lot of topics. The downtown survey, the ADU survey, the upcoming survey on tourism are all just going to be pieces of the pie for council. But along those lines, one thing staff is investigating is a community engagement platform. There's a few options out there by different companies that would provide, I think, a more dynamic type of process where counselors could get a more instantaneous feedback, as opposed to going through this process of kind of belaboring all of these questions and these points and sending them out to people and asking for them to respond back within a really short time frame. I think this kind of ongoing platform is something staff is definitely interested in, and I'll provide an update on that.
I love the longevity questions too, like, so we can compare ourselves, like, why do people feel unsafe now and they didn't 5 years ago, or whatever it is. Like, I think those are important too. So I don't know, more of a balance maybe, if that makes sense.
Could we see what the dashboard would look like? Do we have time to do that?
So we're just so you know, we're over time, but that's okay. That doesn't mean we can't see it. I was going to suggest maybe take 2 minutes to do that, and then give Savannah 15 minutes, but it's
okay. Are you able to see it?
Barely.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. Okay. So this is, illustrative. It gives you an example of, there's 4 tabs here at the top. So looking at a summary tab would give you some summary information. Obviously, this is Bettendorf, Iowa, and Chicago are both kind of sprinkled throughout here as part of this sample. Telling you, like, looking at the overall satisfaction over time, and then scrolling down, this is a specific section of the surveys. This is the add-on section. So this is questions that can be, there's certain questions that are standard each time, and there's one section that can change. So that would be looking at some results in there. You can see the satisfaction breakdown based on most satisfied or least satisfied demographics. You can look at various priorities, going back up to the top here, looking at the feed. So this gives you in real time, you'll be able to see the answers to the open-ended questions. So scrolling down, get an idea of that. And then looking at, in the specific questions, you can look at the responses to those questions as well, right? So being able to sort of in real time, able to see some of this information too, as it's coming in is a powerful thing. And then like you'll notice on this first page, it has Bettendorf, then it has cohorts. The idea also is that over time in the future, you'll be able to compare yourself to benchmark against other communities as well.
Thank you very much. Did you have any questions?
Thank you so much.
Any more quick questions, council? Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you, Andrea. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, on to downtown's next step project update. Savannah.
Mayor and council, we have Savannah Lytle with our community development department. And this really is just an informational only item just to talk a little bit about the downtown's next step project, some of the engagement that we've already done, kind of where we are in the process and how that process looks in a timeline. So just informational, but I know it's something that there's been a lot of emails on that y'all have received. So we just want to provide this kind of informative process just so that you can kind of see the bigger picture of all the steps that have been undertaken by the community development team.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councilors and Mayor. Savannah Lytle, Community Development. First of all, I would just like to start with a quick summary of our bump outs. I know that was an inquiry as well, so I'll briefly mention that. We've had 18 applications. 6 of those have been approved. The ones that we're waiting on to be approved, they're waiting for their liquor license modification of the premise permits. So once we receive those will be approved as well. So that's 18 bump outs. Currently, Streets went and swept downtown Main Avenue yesterday, and so they're ready to be installed tomorrow. It's the installation date for those 6 that have been approved. Once those are installed, then Streets will go and install the planters that you saw last year for protecting, and then those will be planted in May. We are looking for volunteers, so if anybody wants to go out there and volunteer to plant in the planters, we are needing volunteers. So that the bump outs is a good lead in to downtown's next steps. As we all know, in 2020, the bump outs were created as a result of the limitation in restaurants for the pandemic, and those have had great success. And so we thought to ourselves, how do we build upon this success that we've had from the bump outs? What does our future Main Avenue look like? And so we worked and hired MIG, a planning firm, to help us with this. So we sent out that questionnaire. That seems to be the theme for today. We sent out that questionnaire in December to ask folks, how do they use downtown? How do you use it? How do you get there? Why are you using it? What do you like about it? What doesn't work for you? And from that one, we had over 930 respondents for that questionnaire. And from that, we put together our vision, objectives, and goals for what we want for downtown Main Avenue. So the main thing that we saw from that questionnaire is that people will go downtown for the experience. They're there for their restaurants, they're there for dining, retail. The majority are driving to downtown, and then they're walking once they're there. And then 77% said they wanted to see more outdoor dining. They want to increase that experience. That reason that they're there was for dining, and they wanted to see more of that. They wanted more space for pedestrian and crosswalk improvements, some more pedestrian safety, more bicycle safety. So really increasing that multimodal experience downtown, more landscaping, more places to interact and sit and really have that creation of space or sense of place that we've chatted about. So from the vision statement, we came up with supporting and growing, thriving local businesses, making Main Avenue more walkable and bikeable, create memorable experiences unique to Durango, include and invite all local residents and visitors, as well as ensure flexibility and resiliency seasonally and over time. So from the vision, goals, and objectives, 4 conceptual designs were created, and that's what the second questionnaire was. And they weren't either or conceptual designs. They were really to start the conversation with folks about what they liked about various elements from the 4 different conceptual designs. Do you like the trees in this one? Do you like the mid-block crossing in this one? And to really get that sense of what people preferred from each of these designs, because most likely the final preferred alternative will be one that is a combination of all of these in some aspect. Also, we don't see it as one size fits all for downtown Main Avenue from 5th to 14th. We obviously know how different it is almost on every block. And so perhaps there is an alternative that works best for one, or perhaps it works best for 3 of the blocks. So that will be when they come forward with the preferred alternative. We'll also do the full Main Avenue from 5th to 14th and show which design for each of the blocks, so that we'll see what that looks like as well. So as mentioned, we've had 1,100 respondees to this questionnaire, and we will take all of those results and present them at a community meeting on March 31st at Fort Lewis College Center for Innovation in the main mall, so that we can show the public everything that we've received from this latest questionnaire, all the answers, all the what people preferred or didn't like. And from that, the consultants will then work on a preferred design that then again will be presented at a community meeting, so we can see that draft preferred design, take feedback on that, present it to council, that draft, and then from there we'll refine it for the final that will be presented in June. So based on your feedback as well as the public, we did extend that questionnaire an additional 2 weeks. So March 18th is the last day for that questionnaire, for that one, of comments on the conceptual designs. So that's a quick update, downtown's next steps.
Thank you. Great. That was really quick. So now we have some extra time for council questions and comments. Anybody want to say anything?
Well, first of all, thank you and for leading this effort and getting the enormous community engagement. At the last city council meeting, we had talked about if there were designs that you weren't thinking about, could you share your rationale with us for maybe why they're not presented or whatnot? And I don't know if that's something that might be forthcoming before you have this community meeting, or if you're maybe waiting and you haven't ruled anything out yet.
There are some options that were ruled out fairly quickly. One of those would be the pedestrian mall. We get that very frequently. Mm-hmm. And so the reason we don't see a lot of pedestrian malls being built in the United States anymore, and there's a couple of reasons for that, and it's economics. We've either seen when they're completely shut down that people no longer go there, and so the businesses close and they shut down. That's been the primary reason that we've seen them. The other alternative is they're extremely successful, like Pearl Street Mall in Boulder, Colorado, which most of us are familiar with. They became so successful that it's mostly chains in there. It's very hard for small local businesses to be able to afford that real estate space. So that's not something that we want. So an alternative that we had was something that in planning lexicon is called a festival street, but I really see it as a public amenity block or public space block more than a festival street, because it's the beautiful thing about it is it's not programmed. And so it really is open to all these different alternatives. It is a street that can quickly be closed down. It would have pop-up bollards on either end, which is great for public safety. We've worked with the police department throughout this whole process, so that would create that safety. It would create it, there is no curb or gutter, so it's just one level surface all the way from storefront all the way across, so it makes it easy to just go around to a different festival, or maybe it's a farmer's market, or maybe it's just Friday nights that gets closed down on that certain block. And again, we really see this as maybe a block or two on Main Avenue. It wouldn't be the entire block, but that's what we're seeing more than the pedestrian mall option, which completely shuts the street down. Another one is a one-way, would Second be one-way and Main Avenue one-way. You don't gain a lot for that. There's not a lot of benefit that you would get, especially for the infrastructure costs and the rerouting of traffic. It wouldn't get us much more sidewalk space in that, so it just makes sense to keep them both two ways. So those are a couple options.
Will that explanation be somehow communicated to the public, maybe at the March meeting, but even possibly prior to then?
Yes, absolutely. We did a best practices memo that's online on our website, and it goes into more detail on that, but absolutely we'll continue to keep relaying that in our community meetings.
Thank you. Thank you.
Questions. Is it possible for you to share the results of the survey with council prior to the 3/31 meeting? wait till that would be great.
Absolutely.
And then I attended the chamber board meeting today, and there was some concern expressed during that meeting that the traffic study is being done after we get the results of this questionnaire. Can you talk through, why that timeline is the way it is?
Yes, so these are the conceptual. So we're really just trying to get the idea of where we want to go, what this will look like. And from there, when we understand that it's going to be whatever the preferred alternative is, we will move forward with construction documents, at which time then the traffic study will be done. Perhaps the conceptual will need to be refined a little bit, but we really want to understand which direction we're going forward with prior to starting the full construction documents and moving forward with that traffic study.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions?
Yeah, I have a couple, if I may. Thank you for the update. On the sheet on the schedule, it says the parking inventory and strategies as final deliverable by the end of January. So that was one of the comments. I'm just not sure if I even saw that document. But regardless of that, if I have to take two concerns that I heard back from the community, beside maintaining our historical character, it would be parking and fairness for all. So parking one part, and the other one would be fairness for all users and businesses in that area. So on the first topic, parking would be reduced in any of the options, and it have direct impact on businesses, as well as the fact that we're a growing community, so there will be more parking needs. And I believe that we need to address parking now before a redesign instead of after the redesign, because not only would you have all the impacts from the construction where businesses are suffering on top of what they have gone through during the COVID years and during the fire impacts and all the prior events, it would alleviate many concerns from those businesses and hopefully get more support if we offset the parking in advance instead of afterwards. So that was one point. We've already discussed, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but the transit center, there were 2 lots in addition on 2nd Avenue that are potential sites. We discussed it. It seems that there's very few obstacles to move forward with either of those options, or at least discuss them in more detail. So actually, this is more for council. I would like to see if council is supportive of moving parking discussion forward with direction to staff to do so. And so there's a question I'll ask, you can answer it afterwards. And on the second topic, the fairness to all businesses, I want to highlight that the bulb outs provide free business space for a select number of businesses. And it's just not necessarily fair to all businesses, whether some businesses are on a corner, they don't have access to bulb outs. Other businesses do not have the type of business that requires a bulb out, whether it's an art gallery or a retail store. If a company wants to expand and they have to lease interior business space, they will pay top dollar for it. And other communities do charge exterior rental space for bulb outs. And I think it might be beneficial to start that discussion earlier on than later on to get, again, a lot of support, better support from all the businesses, and have a structure in place. It doesn't have to be fine-tuned to the dollar, but a structure in place that shows that all businesses will benefit from those revenues. And we could even, it can be spent on specifically to the North Main, or not North Main Street, historical streets. Could be flowers over Christmas, or certain improvements or whatever it is, temporary seasonal improvements could be administered by the bid or whatever. But if you have a structure in place and you have that part of the whole discussion, I hope that more of our community, especially the businesses, would support a broader range or more options of the ones that are presented for the downtown visioning. So that's another question I have more for council, if there's support to move forward or direct staff to have a fee discussion, get something in place there to address the two key areas that I see that I've heard a lot about, which is parking in advance and then fairness to all businesses through a fee structure.
I can answer really quickly on the parking.
Yeah.
So there was it was included in existing conditions, which is also on the website. There was the parking inventory that was a deliverable in the existing conditions, and it is on the website, but I can email it to you as well. There is a parking study, a citywide parking study done by the Transportation Department. We just put out the RFP last week. So that is to fully understand the supply and demand. And so where there are issues and what some solutions would be for that. Wade Moore with the Parking Division has done an amazing job of going through and documenting occupancy rates. And there are significant occupancy rates downtown. And so it's also just sharing that story as well of where there is parking. So maybe that as well as just educating people on where there is parking. As you mentioned, there's a bunch of city parking lots that aren't being used, and those occupancy rates are shown through Wade Moore's work on that. So we are in tandem working with this parking study and the Transportation Department so that we do know how to address this. With the bump outs, there are 56 parking spaces last year that were removed. And then with these designs, something like conceptual design 1, which is just the bulb outs at the end of the block, would only be 4 parking spaces per block. So there are ones being removed, but not nearly as much as there are with the bump outs. And then I think your other question was in regard to the bistro space that would be provided in front of the businesses. This was an option in all conceptual designs. And this was in response to the questionnaire results where people said they want more outdoor dining space. And so that was one way to provide this in a safe manner so that they weren't out against the street. And we are hoping that this is open to all businesses. Something like Maria's Bookshop, they put out beautiful planters in their bump out. So we're hoping they'd use their bistro space like that as well. We've also had business owners ask us if they had the support of the neighbors adjacent to them, could they use their bistro space too? And absolutely. There is a fee structure in place currently for the bistro patios. And so that is something that we would expand and continue to work on. To your point, we would move that forward with our new bistro spaces. So yes, we could use that funding to provide, as you mentioned, maybe it's planters, maybe it's maintenance of some of these bulb outs at the corners to that aspect. So we are working with that as well, but we're hoping those retail spaces could use it as well in some creative form as well. We know they won't just be putting out chairs and having people dine, but is there something else they could do with benches or something to that effect?
Could you elaborate a little bit on the fee structure that is currently in place?
Yes.
Sorry, before we do that, it's 4:45 was council's thought about how much longer we should go.
Good question. I'm willing to go till 5. I think we need to save some time to eat dinner.
Yeah, that's fine. Till 5.
Yes, it is $300 if there is an alcohol permit and $100 if they don't have alcohol serving in their bistro.
So it's not by square foot. That's interesting.
No, not currently.
That would solve the added space from the neighbor's property. So I guess that brings my question to council. Is there an interest to ask staff to look into fast forwarding more discussions on parking, since no matter what the parking study says, we have lost and we would lose parking space. So to offset that impact and anticipate growth for the next 10 years.
When the parking study comes back, that will be brought to council in a report. Yeah, I think that is the appropriate time to talk about it. The last parking study showed that we had a walking problem, not a parking problem. And so I wouldn't say fast tracking. You can't fast track it any more than you have an RFP out or getting ready to do it. So as long as we get the information, I'm About that.
I'd like the information first before directing.
Yes.
Savannah, I have oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Yeah. What the time, when do you expect the results of that parking survey to be?
I don't have that information, but I can get that for you. It's through the Transportation
Curious.
Department.
Because it is important as part of the study.
Yeah.
If it's soon, hopefully we can get it. Like you said, we don't want to rush it, but hopefully it'll be forthcoming and accurate. Yeah. Updated.
Get the information or to go ahead.
Oh, wait till it's ready. I mean, I don't think you can fast track it anymore, but I do have a question for Savannah, though, if others don't.
Go ahead.
So Savannah, I was so impressed, and I'm looking at Scott and Kevin here, in 2020 with the ability to pivot and get the bump outs created. I also, though, heard from constituents and saw it for myself, the restaurants not only having the bump outs, but then taking over the sidewalks. So, you get a little too much of thing, and then it becomes a slalom track trying to get down the sidewalks. So as you think about this, how do you envision anticipating that encroachment of the walking space and what might be needed from city staffing, or how you're going to address that?
Yeah, we definitely saw that. And what's interesting is currently how our sidewalk is set up is that there are so much already in there. The lampposts are in there, the trash is in there, the plant. I mean, it is filled with parking meters, everything else. So we're hoping with this new design, it will leave a clear, straight path for pedestrian movement, whatever that width ends up being. And the lamps will be moved out and the parking meters will be moved out of it. And so when they come forward with this bistro permit, they will have to show us the location of where that railing will be. It will have to be enclosed, and that's when we'll go out with engineering inspectors, most likely, or myself, somebody from community development, to ensure that that railing is right where it is so that it won't shift. As you say, we did see some of that occur, and we're hoping to really have that unobscured pedestrian pathway right next to it.
Permanent or part-time or year-round or what?
Year-round, and that was another thing that came out of our study is people want more year-round outdoor dining. So we do see them as something that would be more year-round. So they put in that more permanent railing, which hopefully would keep people from.
You said there's
It is currently.
I agree that we should also look at that because it is taxpayer property that we're expanding onto, and yet private businesses are taking advantage of it. I don't know what the right answer is there, but I do see how that's kind of challenging.
Do you see a uniform look or individual, have it whatever you want with regard to what the main avenue may look like?
As far as the bistros or all of it
As far as the bistros, you've got it can change from one to another and look very different. Some can be, themed by the restaurant, looking at, that kind of a Western theme I've seen, and others can be just very different look.
Yeah, I think at this point, again, it's conceptual, so we're not sure, but we really see it as they could do their individual, but we'll keep them unified. It will be the height of the railing, that type of thing, the materials that will have to meet our downtown design guidelines, and which are also held up to historic preservation standards, as this is in the National Register Historic District. So that's where there will be, maybe in this kind of form and mass, will be this uniform look. So as you're walking down, you see that uniform, but yet there'll be that creativity in there as well for what their chairs look like or that type of thing. Tents will not be allowed. That is something we definitely want to keep it open and engaging with the public. And also it's very important that people see our historic structures.
It's all very exciting. Thank you.
It is. Any more questions or comments? Thank you very much, Savannah.
Thank you.
All right, we will convene for our city council meeting at 5:30.